Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for July 23rd, 2018. We'll begin with a special order calendar, continued hearing items. Item number 1, 55137BZ, 23302 Northern Boulevard, Queens. Am I calling this number 2 also?
Yeah, you might as well. Is it number 2? I don't think it's number 2.
The lineup was revised.
Oh, it was? Oh, okay.
So do you want me, so item number 2, 33478BZ, which is 233-20 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
All right, so with respect to the first item, we have photos showing the removal and a letter of proper disposal of the drums, finally. Since they have a lot of work to do on the site before we can really verify that they're complying with our terms. We had talked about it at the last hearing that we give them like a 1-year term on this change of use so that we can have them make the changes and then come back and verify that they've actually done it. And then part of the concern is we've been talking a lot about these two sites and their relationship to each other, and that they don't want these to be combined into one case, right, in one zoning lot. So that makes it difficult for us to kind of monitor between the two. And do we assume, therefore, that the cars are driving into the whatever that garage through this site? It's not really clear how operations is going to work because they keep traveling these separately. The notes also say they're going to repair the existing fence, but the fences are in really terrible shape, so they have to be replaced around the entire site. So the note should say, replace the fence. They also need to show that the asphalt will be resurfaced and the spaces will be striped. I assume striping, because it's just clearer about how to lay this out. And to be clear that that area should remain that sort of open maneuvering area with no striping. Also, there needs to be notes that say the building walls will be repaired and painted. And they show these two little tufts of planting that should be specified. Either you're actually telling us what it is, or there isn't any planting. And I think that needs to be specified, and the planters need to be detailed. And then with respect to the other site, it's again about the conditions of the, It's again about the conditions of the fence and repainting and resurfacing. I remember from the last hearing that we talked about when they do the major work on the first site, that's when they'll use the same contractor to do the work on this site. So the surfacing in front of the parking area is in really bad shape, so that needs to be resurfaced. The fences have to be replaced. They were also on that's the second site, supposed to show us where the trash enclosure will be located and a detail for the enclosure. They only showed it to us for the first site. So thinking they travel together with a 1-year term for this use change. Any other comments?
In addition to the trash, for the second site, that is the corner site, I had asked that they also revise the Z100 plan to remove the note about the existing curb cut, which is straddling the two subject sites that's before us. And as part of the first one, the plan shows that is being removed. So we need the drawings also to be consistent.
Okay.
So on 33478, which is 23320, they still need to remove the curb cut note.
Right. They need a
On
note
that
that
plan.
says curb cut removal, which they
23302
have on
is
the other
already done.
one.
Just copy that same note from that other side, from the red side to the...
The applicant might have sent it, did send it on late Friday. I think it was just like towards the end of the day, so there was like a
I didn't see
hustle
it.
and bustle. I don't believe it's been uploaded yet. I'm not super sure, but I will have that uploaded on the minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Part of what makes this so difficult is this unwillingness to combine the two sites, and I'm wondering whether even the drawings should just so I get that they don't want to combine the sites for whatever kind of business reason, right? But that maybe they show like a ghosting of the adjacent site on each set of drawings, so we can understand how they work together, and for future boards, they'll understand how these work together, because we were like unpacking this. It took us a long time to figure out that they're working in tandem, and I don't think there's an objection to them working in tandem. So maybe that would help.
I
So,
would only say that so that their future boards don't have the confusion of if we are treating them same, to have a note that the coast site is part of a separate BSA application.
Maybe
Right.
indicate BSA
Indicate.
calendar number, blah, blah,
Right,
blah.
so,
Right.
right, there
Say
could
not
be
part
maybe
of
a
this
key that says BSA calendar number this, BSA calendar number
right,
that.
but use a
That's-
different, a ghosting kind of line weight, or
So that-
you hatch out that says not part of
Not
this
part of the
application, but at least we are able to see the flow of traffic, we're able to see where the gates are, where, all of that stuff. And also that would make the curb cut make more sense, because you're taking it out of one so that you don't access that way, but meanwhile, they do have to access, so,
Yeah.
okay.
To that end, I think that the fence that I saw seemed like a temporary fence. I think they need to put a permanent type fence.
Yes.
Replace it with a permanent fence as opposed to another temporary fence.
So the temporary fence is just there because there was kind of sort of chaos on parking on the sidewalks and everything. So they just did that to make us feel that they're controlling this site while no work is going on it. But there won't be a fence, I don't believe, on the side street line.
Okay.
It'll be a fence around the property.
Okay.
And that's the one that's in terrible shape. It's
No, I think there'll
collapsing.
be a fence along between
There's
the
supposed
two
to be a
uses.
fence
also.
Between the
separated.
two uses, but
Yeah.
not on the street line. There's a
Right.
temporary
Right.
fence on the street line as
Right,
well, right?
So to Commissioner Shibata's point, I think the drawings note need to say that these will be permanent fences.
Yeah, okay.
And I didn't see any pictures of the repainting. I know we said that they were to repaint.
Mhm. Yeah, so both buildings need to be improved. That should all be part of the big work that goes on simultaneously on two sides. Okay.
A question, so will they both travel together for the one-year grant?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 1 year is sufficient for the work to be completed?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually not a lot of work. It's resurfacing, it's painting, stuccoing the outside of the building, it's putting fencing up. It's just that, it's kind of a major thing to do where you're going to dig all this stuff up. You need to move the cars off-site to be able to do it, and so they want to have one contractor do both. That makes sense. They need a permit also to install those trash enclosures. So we need to see all the notes on the drawings, including the trash enclosures, before we can decide on this. Okay. Okay.
Good? Item number 3, 86649BZ, 20001 47th Avenue, Queens. This is administratively adjourned for late submission.
Correct. So this is the third adjournment in a row. The submission, there was a submission made on July 10th. It was due on July 5th. That's why it's adjourned. So there will be no further submissions, and we should submit a...
Adjournments?
Adjournment, sorry. Thank you. But we should submit a warning letter with return receipt to the owner and the its representative,
649 BC.
so that they understand. I mean, it's an extension of term, so they have to do this, but they can't keep messing up. And that submission that was made on July 10th better be complete. So the representative should review the materials and make sure it was responsive to the last hearing, which we had in January. So, Carla, this is yours. Can you reach out to Mr. Solfero and tell him?
Yeah, he emailed me to ask what the adjournment dates are and stuff, but...
Yeah, but more than that, he needs to go and look at his submission.
Right.
Listen to the hearing on January 9th,
Oh, yeah.
and make sure
That's
that
number
he's responding.
5, I don't know.
Because if he's not, then it's going to delay this more, and then there'll be excuses for not submitting, et cetera, et cetera. So Okay.
Item number 4, 54556BZ, 2001 Williams Bridge Road, the Bronx.
Okay, the circulation plan between the pumps and the store parking was revised to take it out from the sidewalk, or dependent on the sidewalk. I'm not sure how you prevent it physically from happening. I mean, you can show that everyone exits and goes around, but I was wondering whether there's any kind of a bollard system or a rail that could be installed that would encourage that. I don't actually know, because some people may find it's just a lot nicer to drive on the sidewalk. But landscaping was installed as requested, and I thought it looks really good.
I had similar concern, and I don't know if there is a solution to putting any obstruction that would prohibit somebody from turning, because you can't put anything on the sidewalk. It would have to be on the property line, and that would affect other turning movements that do want to get onto the streets. So it's just, I'm not sure why they are proposing this and not considering to move the parking in a little bit more tandem way, and then move this, the handicap parking further away. That would prevent this using of the sidewalk.
I'm not sure where else they would park. Tandem parking doesn't work because
Well,
you
just
don't own both cars.
making the ADA, the handicap parking space parallel to the building would just, all it would require is someone who has come to the gas station to fill up will just pull up against
So that's just
space.
one parking
That's just
space.
one, and then if that would replace 2 parking spaces, that would replace another regular parking spaces, and that maybe can be accommodated if a tandem parking is provided behind the building.
But how does tandem work if you don't own the car?
Well, there are 2 employee parking. The plan shows there are 2 sets of
Oh.
employee parking, and those could be tandem parking,
true.
and the remaining can be just as it's shown in the drawings, and then you're not losing the total number of parking spaces. And I think that would definitely
It would have
reduce-
one car then that can drive without any chance of needing to go to
Right.
the sidewalk. But what about the others?
The others, because they would be so further away from the from the gas pump, the cornermost curb cut, and because there is a car that is parked parallel to the building, it may
Discourage people from
discourage people,
driving on the
and then you
sidewalk?
could put a bollard against the handicap parking, so which would prevent somebody going away. It would force the movement onto the street and then onto the back on. Right? Or people will just wait at the gas station while they're filling, they'll run in.
Well, that's what we talked about.
That's most
last
typically
time.
what people do
Typically
there.
do, right.
Or, if they don't see a handicap car there, they'll just
They'll
pull
use
right
that,
in,
sure.
thinking I'm going to be 2 minutes, and they're going to run in anyway.
Yeah. Well, that would be, if there were room, I don't know if there is, to fit 2 parking spaces perpendicular,
I think there might be.
then that would eliminate a lot of the chance that people would drive into the sidewalk. Because, arguably, there wouldn't be more than 2 people who would be parking. Most of the time, you park because you're going to run to the bathroom, right? You're going to take more time, so. Okay, that's worth looking at.
Next one?
Just a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Item number 5, 13887BZ, 21836 Hillside Avenue, Queens. This is administratively adjourned for late submission.
Okay, sorry. I'm not in the right order anymore. Okay, yeah, so, yeah, it was also due on July 5th, so, and submitted on July 10th.
And it was incomplete, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Item number 6, 15900BZ, 383 3rd Avenue, Brooklyn. I believe this one is also adjourned.
They requested an adjournment. Again, this is the 3rd adjournment. But I understand in this case, the application is being amended to remove the adjacent site, the U-Haul site, from consideration. So they asked for it to come back really quickly. I think we need to give them enough time to make sure they make a correct submission so we don't have further adjournments. Because this has been going on, it's actually, it's anniversary. It's been going on for a year. July 18th last year. Okay.
No, we don't have to do a letter, right? Tracy's
What?
just asking, are we doing a letter for this? or
No, no
Because
letter,
they're
because I
revising.
understand why.
Okay,
The
just wanna
problem
make sure.
was that it was so unclear how we could deal with that adjoining property for this use, for school use in this district, right? So, okay.
New cases, item number 7, 34143BZ, 3319 Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn. Did everyone get to see the July submission? I'm sorry, I got it to you late.
Still not there. I looked for it.
Are you kidding?
No, it's not there. I looked this morning.
July submission, okay.
I gave you the hard copy, but I asked Vincent to
Oh.
upload it.
I did see, I don't remember. if it was
July
the
10th?
July submission. I saw something
There was a
late.
July submission, it was a cover letter, but the exhibits didn't come up, and then I scanned them, and then Vincent uploaded.
Oh,
No?
No,
I don't
at least
know.
not in the share, our folder.
Oh, maybe it just went to the regular.
I don't know. I'll look. Okay, so.
The
we-
applicant did make the submission.
He did.
It was
It's just-
administratively something. got
Something went
confusing.
wrong.
Well, it's a new case. It was submitted, right? So they responded to notice of comments. I have the July 3rd submission. Was there
number
something
7?
later than that?
No, there was
It was the July 3rd submission.
Right, it
The
was-
letter said, see attached documents,
But
but
those
those
aren't
attached
there.
documents were not there.
right, and then
Those were
the CD
uploaded.
wasn't able
Because they were
to,
big and they were sent with a CD,
And we
but
couldn't-
somewhere in the process, it
Right, it
wasn't
wasn't done,
realized
and then
that
the applicant
attachments
resubmitted them.
were on a CD, so it was thought that it was taken care of until, I think.
and then the
someone
applicant
realized.
resubmitted it on Friday. For some reason, it didn't go up, I guess, then.
Okay.
We will,
I'm sorry, we'll take
Right,
it.
because
I
it's like
apologize.
Yeah.
continuous
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
and stuff like
Oh,
that, that we
right, the
didn't get,
continuous use
yeah.
we didn't get. That's correct, yeah, okay.
And that's part
July
of the third
3rd?
submission.
On number 7?
Right, oh, okay.
I-
So we do have proof of service of
latest
initial
submission.
application to officials and
They
of notice of
submitted
hearing
again
to officials.
On Friday, but we didn't get it.
Oh, okay.
We need community board recommendation. This is a very odd site that has a very confusing and elaborate rezoning history, but it appears that Building A, which is on the corner of Euclid and Atlantic, had been the subject of a pre-61 variance and sat in an area that was rezoned in 1961-62 to a C82, which rendered the use group 16 uses as of right. The variance was continued all the way up until 2007, when someone must have realized we didn't even need a variance in that location. So it was surrendered in 2007, and then in 2016, the site was rezoned, which rendered that same site as of right non-conforming. So, yay, okay, so, but we don't, unless there was something in that latest submission, we don't appear to have the correct letter of substantial compliance plans, since they are for a two-story building on the A building, while the letter and C of O refer to a new four-story building, so we're missing the correct
It
set of
would be in
plans.
that third,
Yes.
July
Yes,
3rd submission.
okay.
I know we saw it.
Okay, in any event, the request for the extension is as to the one-story building B, which is landlocked and sandwiched in the center of the block between residential uses. So my main question, because everything else looks pretty normal, is that one-story building is a 260-foot-long wall on the east and the west side, which backs up against the residential lot lines. So my question is, what's the condition of those walls? How in the world are they maintained? What's the relationship, because there's absolutely no access to them without going through people's houses or climbing on the roof and climbing down, and I'm just trying to understand, like, how is that maintained? Many of the houses, but not all, appear to have garages that they built up against the walls, but not all. And so then you've got waterproofing issues and all that, because of course these little garages are never built particularly well. And I'm sure there isn't any flashing or anything that's between them. So it's kind of like, how in the world do they take care of this? Because we often look at the conditions of these sites that are looking for extensions, right? So I'm just trying to understand.
I think maybe photos of that structure would be helpful. I mean, just as an example, in our building, we have a garage where we had excess space, not that needn't be there for parking requirement. So those were converted. It's an open garage kind of. It's just a structure with all open walls, and there we do have a storage facility in that, and which is just kind of, it's kind of exposed to the elements if you think of it, except for the storage bins that are there, the metal bins that are there. And so I'm thinking this is like one of those structures where the exterior is not a full solid structure.
No, the exterior is absolutely a solid brick wall. You can see it in Google Satellite. It's a solid brick wall with a roof. And because don't forget, this was built for a different purpose. It wasn't built as storage. It was built as a laundry, right? So
Right, I forgot about
it
that.
ran laundry equipment, dry cleaning equipment, I mean, whatever. So, and it's really quite bizarre because there are a few of these odd flags, right? But this one's particularly odd because of the nature of this wall that comes right to the back of your house, your house lot, you know? So, yeah, I'm just curious, how do they maintain it? We didn't get any, so service was only to officials, right, not to neighbors. So maybe this is the kind of thing where we do notify neighbors, because if absence of maintenance is causing difficulties for the neighbors, and this is an opportunity for them to say, you know, it's been impossible for me to get anybody to come and fix this wall, or whatever it is, that would be an opportunity for them. Just,
And then how would that
well,
weave into our
so it's the
determination?
same exact thing as if it's a gas station renewal, right? We look around, or automotive repair, we look at it and we say the fences are in rotten shape, fix the fences, the asphalt's in bad shape. In this case, the subject building doesn't have its lot line to lot line built, and there's no way to physically get to it. You can't take a picture of it without trespassing, right? So this isn't different than what we do, saying, fix your fence, repaint your wall. We just finished talking about that they need to stucco and paint the walls of the car showroom, right? So it's exactly the same thing. So I would recommend notifying neighbors who are attached to this building, and only those, but it's neighbors on both sides of the building, so it's maybe 20 houses.
No, and also the building in the front on that street.
Which street is that?
I forget the street. This would
Which
be the
building in
street
the front?
parallel to Atlantic Avenue.
So it's actually train tracks over there.
But there is a building that backs up against.
So, and that touches it? Let me look at this other one, hold on a second. No, I don't have.
Parallel to Atlantic is full.
That would be this.
That's this one. It's where the train is?
Yeah,
Train line
Fulton.
is?
I think that building.
Yeah. You think it backs right into
I
it?
think when I
don't
was
know.
looking at it, that's why I said, but we could
Yeah.
verify it between now and tomorrow.
So the answer would be notify all neighbors that physically abut the building. Okay.
What?
Yeah, sorry.
Let me know when you're ready.
I just want to make sure. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Item number 8, 170-96BZ, 8501 Flatlands Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, I didn't find proof of service of initial filing to officials, but we do have community board recommendations, and we do have proof of notice of hearing. Community board recommends approval. There was a notice of comments that was sent out that asked whether the signs comply with C1 zoning, and I didn't see a response to that. And then they provided us with photographs that make everything look like it's swell, but Google Street and Google Satellite View So one is 2018, one's 2013, show at least 6 cars parked on the sidewalk in front. I'm just wondering if anybody did a site visit and saw the cars parked in front. No? Okay.
Yeah, I noticed it also in the Google view, the vehicles that are parked on the side. It's kind of interesting, many of the buildings are most of the buildings on that block are built to the lot line. And they have their front yard extending out into the side yard. And so I don't know whether the owner knows it or not, that portion of the side yard on which the residential buildings have extended out is actually a public sidewalk and not part of the lot. So that's.
Well, certainly on one of the streets, they have to know that that's public, because the sidewalk becomes very narrow on that side. The other side, you could argue, oh, I thought that was mine, without looking at your deed or your survey. Okay, so they need to speak to that. I mean, what it indicates is the business is very successful because they have so many people waiting to replace their transmissions, but.
With regards to this signage, they do state that it complies with the C23 signage requirement.
Oh, okay.
And they did provide.
That's in C2.
It's in C2.
C2-3.
It's a
C23,
What was the
okay.
condition of the resolution? If C1 compliance is the condition of the resolution, it doesn't matter where they are.
I don't know.
See, that's part
I
of the.
think that's one of their conditions is C1.
Right, that's why I'm saying
exactly.
compliance with C23 is not compliance with the board's resolution.
Because at the time, the variances started way back when this was a residence district, I think. So yeah.
I mean, the board could change that condition.
Right, the
The
96
requirements are
variance.
exactly the same anyway.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, for C1 and
Oh,
C2.
okay.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
The
All right.
requirements for C1 and C2 is the same.
Okay.
So, okay.
So did they just state it, or they demonstrated it?
They demonstrated it. In the sign drawing, they indicated what each one of those signage dimensions are and the total.
Okay. All right.
Well, there's one other thing, in their paperwork, when they list their compliance with conditions, they have maintained landscaping.
I
And
know.
I'm like, was that an accident? Because
Yeah,
there's
because
like
there
no
is
place for
No
landscaping on
place,
this
unless it's
site.
under the car. But I noticed that in a lot of the older resolutions, there was this just mantra that said, maintain landscaping as shown on plans, and then it's not shown on the plan.
Ah,
So careful on mantras. Okay.
Next, move on. Item number 9, 19705BZ, 813 Broadway, Manhattan. This one's going to be postponed to August 7th for failure to proper notice. Item number 10, 21806BZ, 885 Second Avenue, Manhattan.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials, but I didn't find proof of notice of hearing. So we need to check that, please. Community board recommends approval. In this case, happily, the prior board was very careful to note the boundary line between the C1-9 and the R8B, and that the PCE use does not sit within the R8B. The new drawings that are submitted must do the same. They have to show the district boundary line, which doesn't appear to have changed, but they also need to show us a zoning map that shows that it doesn't change. There is a change in hours requested. Do you want me to tell you what they are?
Yes.
Okay, so the hours that were approved were Monday to Thursday, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., Friday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., and the proposed actual hours, anyway, are Monday to Thursday, 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., Friday, 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., so it's extending an hour on either side. And we need fire department sign off on the sprinklers and fire alarms. Any other comments on this one?
Could they just verify their signage? They're saying it's only 16, I think, .6 square footage of signage, but it seems like there's signs, there's one big sign, but like right under it on the glass, but on top of the glass is another sign, and so there are also, I think, some decals and things.
I don't know what the decal rule is.
This came up in another one of our projects, another PC that was on Lexington Avenue, and also it had decals
In every window.
every
right?
window, and we were told DOB doesn't count those as signs.
They're what?
They're not-
So, okay.
Oh, okay.
Non-illuminated, okay.
All right, but there is still a sign that looks like it's actually illuminated from the photos that is under the main sign that's on the exterior wall. It's like the overhang, and then underneath it, there's a, what appears to be an illuminated sign there.
Okay, good.
Ready? Item number 11, 26413BZ, 257 West 17th Street, Manhattan.
Okay.
This is, here we go. That's
So this is CrossFit back and kind of too long in getting back to us, unfortunately. Not too much processing behind the scenes. We have proof of service of the initial application to officials. Community Board 4 defers recommendation since there's litigation concerning the use. So here we are again, and the neighbors are complaining. The submissions by Brick Fitness admit that there continue to be weight drops in the cellar, and there is a proposal for, quote, blind testing with the neighbors and so on and so forth to establish the maximum allowable weight that can be dropped. We've already been there. We've already done that. We already tested it. We already had 3 experts determine what could be done. And we did the testing in 2015, and there's a list of some of the longest conditions you would ever see in a BSA resolution that couldn't be clearer about whether you can do weight drops. The answer is no. What the maximum amount in the cellar level is 135 pounds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do you use the weights on rogue pads, all that sort of stuff, right? So I want to say, and then the neighbors hired private investigators to actually to join the gym and work out in the gym, and they observed weight use to as much as 325 pounds and no compliance with any of the BSA requirements for the prohibition of weight drops, use of rogue pads, or correction of errant patrons by instructors. They did video comparisons to complaint times from many complaints from neighbors, which showed violations of the heavy weights and absence of the rogue pad use. There are photos of the heavy weight use in action. And meanwhile, the applicant, the owner's rep, indicates that, nothing was particularly egregious, and the guy who's complaining upstairs must be hearing neighborhood noises. It's definitely not us. I'm not sure whether the condo provided us with all of the photos that were referred to in the affidavits by the investigators. I only saw actually 2. And the owners have not responded to the condo's submission at all. They don't deny, they don't anything. So I just have to say, I'm not understanding this business model at all. Lawsuits, tenant complaints, private investigators, huge expense to change the structure of the gym. And the only thing you'd have to do to change is the exercise model that includes weight drops. We have other CrossFits that don't drop weights. Weightlifting gyms have strict rules about weight dropping. Why would a business risk closure and ruin for this? I don't understand. But nonetheless, I think the owners and managers have apparently made the choice to risk ruin because they insist on allowing people to drop weights from whichever height But in particular, we're hearing about them drop from shoulder height, chest height, and so on. And the weights are enormous, and they were supposed to have been limited to 135 pounds. None of those weights that we were seeing were 135 pounds.
What submission did you see the weight, like the photo of the weight being dropped?
That was the investigator.
Do you know what date that submission was?
It's an affidavit, I
It's an
believe, from
affidavit?
the investigator who actually took the class, and there's photos, and you could see the weight, I don't know what it's called, pole with
I read the affidavit, I just didn't see the pictures.
Yeah, there were just two pictures. Both investigators said that they had pictures, but only two were included. It's possible that they decided these two were enough information and the others weren't that easy to understand or whatever. This one is very clear because the camera's down low and you can see the weightlifter in the process of lifting, I don't remember how many on a stack. There's like 6 weights on each stack. So now granted, these are those those sort of plastic weights. They look bigger than they really weigh, but nonetheless, if you know your weights, you know that's way more than 135 pounds, which is the maximum. They came to the conclusion, because I think we had concluded that on the first floor, there could be weightlifting, but to a very low weight. I think it was 115 pounds on the first floor, and they came to the conclusion that the sound transmitted anyway, so they didn't allow weights on that floor. But that's only because lifting 115 pounds doesn't sound like anything, other than maybe the grunt of the person lifting 115 pounds. It only sounds like something when you drop it from your shoulders. So my feeling about this is, sorry guys, sell your studio to a yoga studio. I mean,
I think I'm also concerned with the hours that were stipulated. It just, given that the morning is the time when people are more sensing it, why did we allow the starting time to be 5 o'clock when?
because that's a gym business.
to
You don't-
have before work people.
Yes.
But wasn't there a court order in 2013 which had actually a shorter hours?
No, so the court order was before our decision. So the court was trying to handle the nuisance until we came into it and decided what the parameters would be. And so then we decided, because it's just normal gym practice, all gyms start at 5 in the morning, 5:30, that kind of thing. That's just the reality of how it works. So, and it wouldn't have mattered if it ran silent, right? So, and a lot of the complaints were actually in the evening, so it just depends on where your sensitivity is, and one person in particular, I believe, works at home. That's why that person is more often seen on the complaint list, but there's plenty of other names. And I remember this really well. Somebody on the 6th floor complained when we first started working on this. How in the world do you hear it on the 6th floor? Because the weight's really heavy and they're dropping it from their shoulders.
So they never removed any of the higher weights from the building, even though we had made that part of the condition?
So
They can use them without dropping. It's not about having the weights in the
Right.
room, it's about that
So
they're
maybe
throwing
now our
them
condition
from a-
should be no weight above a certain.
We said that.
Yeah,
Can be
there was a
on the
limit
premise.
to what you could lift.
We had a limit to the lifting, and the reality of the situation was they couldn't attract the clientele who can lift far more than 135 pounds, so they had to just say, nobody will notice, whatever, and they could have been reading this literally. The bars are not more than 115 pounds. That's what we meant. But when you stack up all the stacks, you can get to 400 pounds worth of weight by just putting lots of stacks on. So, I mean, I don't know what game they were playing, but they've been getting away with it for a very, very, very long time. I kind of can't imagine how miserable it must be to live in those affected apartments, and how much stress it imposes on those residents to constantly be vigilant that it's 5 in the morning and I just fell out of bed again. which is what was happening back in 2015. We started this in 14, and it took us a year to come to a conclusion about how to regulate them. And for whatever reason, they opted not to be regulated. By the way, we forced them to hang an insulated ceiling first, an acoustical ceiling, which they didn't have. They did that, and then they did testing, and it wasn't enough. Then we found out that the concrete slab that had been poured, which was supposed to be a floating concrete floor, had engaged with the columns and the walls. So as a result, there wasn't a floating floor. It just transferred all the sound right into the walls and columns. So then we required that they install these special, you saw the images of these gas-filled cylinders where all of the lifting platforms, they would be sitting on these expensive gas-filled cylinders, which meant they had to raise the entire floor to make them flush, and then that wasn't enough after the testing. So then they created these things called road pads, which are these 6-inch high foam pads that were supposed to be installed at every lifting platform when you're lifting, so that you could, so the idea of dropping from your waist was considered okay because there's the road pad. And so that's what the testing was based on, drops from waists. But that's not what they're doing either. And when you're up here, it doesn't land right there on the road pad. We have you shoot it out. It lands where it lands.
And it bounces.
And it bounces.
And you have to be really very precise, even if you're at the lower level.
Then it'll fall on the road pad. If you're at the waist and you drop, it'll drop down. If you're up here, it shoots out. We actually have videos from that show what happens when you're up here and you let go. It has to go at an angle, and it goes nowhere near the road pad, or even that vacuum pressure or whatever, that pressurized.
Because I think we also asked them to cut the floor.
They did.
Right?
They cut it and they
isolated the
recessed them.
floor in this
They did
special,
that for sort of
expensive,
aesthetics.
yeah.
So maybe the road area needs to be much bigger.
Maybe
I
this
don't-
is the wrong place
Yeah.
for, I have to
I
say,
agree
I
with
was
you.
so optimistic.
Me too.
I was like, oh,
It's
they only have
millions
2
of it.
years. They're going to prove us wrong. They're going to show
Right.
that they can get along. And the fact that they are not in compliance is just so disheartening.
Yes.
Just, how could you even give them a longer term after
Right.
that? How
I
could
don't know
let
how
it
you
go?
could torture these
Yeah.
people, the neighbors, any more than this. This has been going on, right? 2000, so I forget the year of the initial lawsuit. We didn't even, this didn't even start this didn't start here until it had been a nuisance, I think, for 2 years already in the building. That's why it went to lawsuit. And so they came to us because they were directed by the court to come to us.
Right, because it was a legalization.
Yes, right? And so we were like, in the interest of a business not being driven under and all of this stuff, that's why, and the owners were willing to spend easily, a couple $1 million to upgrade the space. That's my guess, because it was such an elaborate installation. I just don't understand, that's why I keep saying, I don't understand the business model. I don't understand spending a couple $1 million to upgrade your space, and then you ignore 100% of our conditions. And you ignore it when you know there are people watching constantly, they're installing video cameras, the instruction, they're hiring investigators, which they find out. They find out that there's an investigator hired, and then they don't stop their activity, and then another investigator is hired to confirm the first investigator.
I think because of how brazen they are in not following any of the conditions, I don't think there are conditions we can put that are going to remedy this issue. Because if they didn't follow the old ones, there's no reason to believe that they're going to follow in the
Right.
future.
Right.
And especially, they didn't respond to anything from the neighbors. It could be that enough is enough on this property.
Right. And I didn't read the whole transcript in the hearing for the court, but according to building counsel, they didn't say anything when all these accusations were made before the court, right? They could have said, no, Your Honor, that's really not the case. We really did X, Y, and Z. Apparently, they didn't.
That
But I didn't
investigator set
read
us
the
up.
whole transcript, so I don't know. Maybe there was some, but I didn't. So, yeah, I just don't know what to say. And what's so crazy is there are weightlifting gyms all over the city that are not CrossFits, where they are training for competition, right? They're not allowed to drop the weights. If you can't put it down, don't lift it. So, or, find one of these, so go find a farm somewhere and put the building in the middle of the farm.
A one-story building in a mall in Queens, right? We should
Maybe.
access those people.
Or a one-story building on the side of the railroad tracks, like the other CrossFit.
Right.
Nobody's around,
Only
nobody
drop
cares.
when the train is coming. Okay, I don't know. Okay.
Appeals calendar, continued hearing items, item number 12, 205-15A through 214-15A, this is Hook Creek Boulevard and Fortune Way, Queens.
Okay. They did provide a maintenance restrictive declaration. It's been a while since the last hearing, which was in March, so I'm kind of relying on my notes for this. But we were promised a homeowners association agreement, and we didn't receive one of those. Fire department had required sprinklering of all the buildings, and they were saying, oh, well, we don't have to. And so we said, you guys go work it out with fire department. And so I didn't see any indication of how that was resolved, and there were no amended plans that were submitted to indicate sprinklering. Also, we asked that DOT and DEP review the builder's pavement plan. I don't know whether they submitted it. They really didn't submit very much. They submitted what they called a zoning diagram showing the distance between buildings, which is one rule for because all the 7 of the houses are on one zoning lot. The PDF was very difficult to read, but it looks like the houses are separated by the required distances, and there's side yards that look right. Strangely, though, they only showed 7 houses. This is a 10-house development. I don't understand that. Zoning applies to all 10 houses. Why did they do a zoning diagram with 7? Other comments?
No.
There might have been an update, but DOT's position, at one point, it suggested that there should be a ULURP. Did they change that?
That there should be a what?
There should be a ULURP.
Euler.
Did they change that position?
DOT? Really? I don't remember
I'll
seeing.
have to-
No, I don't have that.
I only have,
The thing about the tree, that was a...
so, yeah, DOT way back had a corrected configuration of the turnaround. So that was the thing, I had asked, did DOT sign off on the corrected configuration of the turnaround? Yeah. Right, so we need DOT to have reviewed the builder's payment plan. They also, in terms of the maintenance agreement, the restrictive declaration, they cut it off really abruptly at what's described on the drawings as Fortune Way or whatever it's called. Fortune Way, yeah. I don't know how anyone is going to know where Fortune Way begins and the Map Street ends. So how's that work? So, we fix to this line, is there going to be a line drawn in the sand? Is it going to be a red line that they keep repainting? Is it going to be a brass line that says now entering Fortune Way? Like, how do you know? Because it's completely arbitrary. It's not like a little river passes, and now you're on Fortune Way or something like that, right? So, okay.
Move on? Mm-hmm. Item number 13, 2017-143A, 2532 44th Street, Queens.
Okay, nothing new was submitted, but there isn't at this moment any action for the BSA, given that the owner has proposed to bring the building into compliance. So I don't know the status of that work. I looked online, but I didn't see that. I couldn't really figure out what the status is at the building department. The building neighbor, who's represented by council, ask that we keep this on the calendar pending resolution of the other case that's, for which a variance is being applied.
So that's on for August 7th.
So
Should
the
we-
two buildings may be linked in terms of the issue that's being raised by the neighbor who's not the subject of either application.
Should we then put this to,
We
August
tried to
7th?
get these to travel together.
Yeah, somehow I-
But we
yeah.
couldn't because the variance application hadn't been filed. I don't know what the situation is.
The variance application has been filed.
Okay.
Yeah.
it's filed, it's both the variance application and the appeals application was put back on the appeals application that was off the calendar, which is for 2530 44th Street, was put back on the calendar, and then the variance application was added to the calendar for August 7th.
Oh, so then
So
this
those
should-
two are on.
They're on
Because
for
they
August 7th.
responded to comments,
Okay.
and I put them on.
Okay,
Put the
so-
other one back on the calendar.
So this should
one-
move to August 7th.
Okay, that's what I want to
Just so they
make.
travel together.
Everything together,
Okay.
right, okay. Because this one, I understand they're just waiting for sign-offs.
It is, but
Yeah.
Carlo just asked if this was independent, and I said it is, but
It's
the
indep-
concerns are from the neighbor of the other
Oh,
one.
for both.
Right.
And
So-
they're attached,
Oh,
they're
they are, okay.
semi-detached
Okay,
homes.
that's what I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And the neighbor who doesn't have either of these properties is concerned that whatever applies to the house that's the subject of the variance may also apply to this house, and so that we shouldn't
Lose sight of it.
we shouldn't lose sight of it, and it shouldn't be withdrawn, because maybe there's more.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll lay this over to August
Aren't
7th.
these two separate zoning lots?
They are.
Yeah,
And the conditions that apply get applied to, so there are the zoning conditions and the variance conditions that apply to the entire development.
To each of them, no, separately. Yeah,
each of
they
them
each have their
separately.
own calendar.
Okay. I remember the neighbor had raised a question about the easement.
Yes.
correct.
Does that easement apply to both of these subject lots or only to one?
I believe it only applies to the one that's adjacent to her property,
So-
which is the
and
other one.
To the 30.
subject- But the case that we're hearing now, is that's not affected by the easement?
No.
No.
But counsel for that neighbor said that we need to see what the issues are that come out during the variance review process, because they may somehow be related to this building, I don't know what they could be, and therefore affect his client. That's why he's trying to preserve the right.
But there's
Because the
no-
board's condition affected both properties
Yes.
because of the non-complying side yards.
Right.
Right.
But also, there's no harm in leaving this over to the next
Right.
week, because they're actually coming into compliance, and buildings apparently has no new concerns to raise, so what's the harm in just keeping it on the calendar
Okay.
with that,
Right.
with that other case?
That's okay, I just don't know how the other one.
I don't either.
No, we don't either, but
I don't know
we
if,
can.
I don't know if counsel for the neighbor knows either. But it's just this idea that if we let it go, then we'll regret it, because if we discover something that should have been applying to both and it didn't, then we'll say, uh-oh, we shouldn't have voted on that one, right? Or shouldn't have let it be withdrawn.
It's out of an abundance of caution.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, good, good. New cases, item number 14, 2017-323A, 108 Crook Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay, so notice was actually proper on this finally. So we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. It was postponed at the last hearing because there was improper notice. Community Board recommends approval. The Borough President was actually okay with the application but had comments. The Borough President says he has no issues with the application. Crook Avenue is CCO'd up to the property in question. Extending the existing street and guaranteeing public access is a reasonable alternative to mapping the entire street. As previously suggested, the issue of ownership and maintenance of the newly opened portion of the street should be addressed as part of the BSA exemption. The owner should also be required to file a dedication of public use, which we've never been confronted with before, but it's such an interesting idea, that the county clerk for the street being installed pursuant to the BSA filing and the subsequent builder's pavement plan approval. So pursuant to the BSA filing and the pavement plan approval. That requirement should be memorialized in the resolution to better guide the DOB approval process. If you need additional documentation, please let me know. So my question, though, is this is one of those very odd GCL waivers. It's an entirely improved street filled with houses that are relying on this unmapped improved street. And this is the only vacant lot on the entire street. Doesn't this qualify for that GCL
yeah.
36-3?
number 3 exception? So there's the stand.
They need to have COs for those
It-
residents.
Yeah.
Those residents need to have COs.
Right, so that's the question, did anybody check? It says, if the Department of Buildings determines that such one or two family residence is located within the same block and fronting on the same unmapped street in question as another building or structure that successfully appealed to the BSA and has been issued a C of O, that's maybe
Needs
one
to have a
problem.
GCL
And
waiver.
provided the unmapped street fronting such one or two family dwelling has been suitably improved to the standards and specs of DOT, that's another question.
That's DOB's call, so they.
And
maybe they can
further
check with DOB. Yeah.
provided that it is equipped with sprinklers, which I'm sure they would be willing to do. And then the other version of it is, if the Corp Council has issued a CCO, which this one has, determining the public way has been open and in use to the public for a minimum of 10 years, which is when you get a CCO, and has been attested to by documents satisfactory to the municipality, well, we got it from the borough president's office, that the unmapped street abutting such buildings shall have been suitably improved to the satisfaction of DOT in accordance with standards and specs approved by such apartment as adequate in respect to public health safety. It sounds like it might meet the A finding of 3, which is a shame.
Well, they can go
Because
to,
why didn't the
yeah, maybe they can go to
do
buildings.
that?
and check. Can
So
ask her to go to buildings and
DEP,
check.
so assuming it needs to continue, because it's a shame to continue and then be married to the BSA, et cetera, et cetera. DEP also had comments as of July 3rd, which need to be responded to. Again, these comments almost look like the ones we had on a previous application where they don't have these things. The applicant submitted a letter along with a map from the DEP's office for the status of the above restaurant street. Applicant must submit a copy of the final map of the City of New York and a copy of the certified house site connection proposal showing the calculations for sanitary and storm discharge. Must submit plans showing connection to the city water main, for its comments. So. Okay.
Item number 15, 2018-22A, 255 18th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, an adjournment was requested by the property owner stating new counsel engaged at the end of May and needing more time. And DOB just on Friday sent an email stating that they consented to that request for more time.
Well, they had
right?
verbally agreed to it.
Yeah, but
Just
we needed to
buildings-
see it in
No, I
writing.
don't know, but buildings is a little, like for October, they want to do October, the applicant. Not the applicant, I'm sorry, the property owners. So I don't
So
know.
we don't know about DOB, so we should find out what DOB wants, because I don't know why they need so much time on this.
Yeah. And also, we had suggested maybe do a site inspection if we want to get
Yeah.
access. So Marvin Mitzner, who's representing, who's co-counsel with Stuart Klein, is the contact person, so if we want to set something up at some point.
Yeah.
To go site visit the units and the basements, the cellar and all that other stuff.
Especially if it
The
is going to
cellar.
be pushed out to October, we want something before October.
Yeah, of course, right. But, you know, that's the thing, is if they're trying to vacate occupancy, then pushing it and pushing it and pushing it is a way of, we've seen, getting away of getting rent for more and more and more and more and more months, right? We've seen that before. Okay.
Zoning calendar, continued hearing, zoning calendar, continued hearings, item number 16, 2016-4217, 17BZ, 1665 Bartow Avenue, the Bronx.
This was administratively adjourned, there's no submission, no sign of anything.
Item number 17, 2016-4265 BZ, 25 Bleecker Street, Manhattan.
So we had a question about uniqueness, which they were supposed to be responding to. One of the hardships complained of, as we look at the site, is that it's vacant, and is that it's a shallow site. So shouldn't the uniqueness study also be looking at that comparison in the study area? It's a shallow site. It's a vacant shallow site, they're claiming, right? Maybe they look at shallow site separately from vacant. For further evidence of viable as-of-right uses in addition to 31 Bond Street, viable as-of-right as in office uses. We currently have in hearing a Soho building that's divided into two under 25-foot wide portions, and the proposed use on the upper floors is office. So office seems to be the new thing you do with a small building, the new old thing that you do with a small building. The owner is saying we can't compare a new building to existing buildings, but I'm still not persuaded that there's a case that this is a vacant lot. And the reason for that is, I note that LPC approved removal of the building. So their certificate of appropriateness was issued for removal of the building. They did that, though, not because the owner persuaded LPC that the building was in irretrievable condition, which sometimes happens, where they'll look at a federal period building, something extraordinarily valuable historically, and they'll say this is beyond repair, everything is collapsing. Instead, it was determined that it could be removed because the building was not viewed as contributing to the historic district in which it's located due to extensive modifications to the facades over the years prior to the district's designation. So in the 1980s, that facade was completely redone. And even the rear was done, so none of the visible facades were retained, right? With respect to removal of the existing building, I presume demolition drawings have been prepared for its removal. If that's the case, these should be provided, or floor plans of the existing building and photos of existing conditions that are key to the plan should be provided. We only received a site plan for existing conditions, so we actually don't know anything about this existing building. And if the building is in such bad shape, I have to say, I'm assuming the front facade is tied into the sidewalls, otherwise, why is it standing? And if so, then why don't we see cracks or leaning lintels on the front facade? That's the usual giveaway that you have lots of failure. And then I go back to what we see in the tax map, lots 140, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, all have three-story existing buildings on narrow, shallow lots. So what if they're also in bad shape structurally? Do we then get variances to demo and replace them all with new? I mean, I'd be doing that if I owned one of those houses, one of those buildings. Shadow studies were prepared that compare the proposed to an as-of-right build-out option, but with a variance, the assumption is there is no as-of-right enlargement or new construction because the project isn't viable without the variance. So either the existing building remains or you have a vacant lot, and the shadow should compare to that. So that's just an incorrect delta. So I'll let Commissioner Sheta speak more to this, but the site surveys show the floors less than 1 inch out of plumb, and the sidewall deviation also in the ½ inch range, so I'm not understanding how that's a sign of imminent collapse. With respect to scope of the waivers, it's a lot of asks. Use group 2, use group 6 at the first floor, rear yard. If we determine there's an A finding, we need to drill down what the relief should be. There's a lot of relief. With respect to general issues, I'm pretty certain that the building code won't allow you to have a fire stair terminate at the 5th floor in someone's apartment. I've had direct experience with this, so in a much smaller building, and this is a multiple dwelling, so where is your second means of egress? I don't know how any of that's allowed. Anybody else?
I had similar concern on the fire stair. With regards to the uniqueness, I kind of thought they met it, based on the fact that they have shown pretty much all the shallow lots, lots that are equal or less than the subject site. And one of the questions that was raised at the last hearing was about the clustering of some of the shallow lots on the subject block. And they were adequately able to show that there isn't a clustering that's going on the subject block. There are other blocks that have shallow lots, and so I was satisfied.
I have a question about that before we go on. So I cut and pasted the tax map, and all the lots. So they may not have shown them because the lots adjacent are a little tiny bit bigger than 1390. They're like, this one is 20, I think, wide. And so this one on 49 is like 22, and 48 is
Right.
21. And so they take those out of the equation. But when you look on the lot, on the tax map, all of the lots that are adjacent down the street, with the exception of lot 52 and 50, which are wide, are the same depth. I mean, 50 and 52 are the same depth, but they're wide. But 48, 49, 48, 47, 46, 45 are the same exact depth, and 44 and 43 are shallower, and 140 is both shallow and skinnier. So that is a cluster. I didn't understand that.
But are we looking at are these individual zoning lots, or are these zoning lots that are under multiple ownerships and therefore would be developable in a manner? Typically, those are the
This is a
tests
historic
that we
district,
go
so
through.
those buildings are not coming down. So they're all little 3-story buildings, all of them identical. They have a common cornice line all the way, right? And so they're all in the same condition physically. They're all probably built around the same time period, but most of those other ones have their original facades. So Landmarks probably considers them contributing. But we can't use whether Landmarks allows you to tear it down as one of the criteria, right? And I don't know, so whether or not they're on the same zoning lot, I'm not even sure that that's relevant, because there's nothing much that you can do to these buildings. You can add maybe a little penthouse, but Landmarks is unlikely to allow you to go the full FAR on these buildings. So I'm not sure how these guys are better off, and there's so many of them. That's my problem. So, and, at the same time, if this was just a request for a use change, or let's say a rear yard waiver, that's different. It's a shallow lot, yeah, okay, a rear yard waiver. But this is both residential throughout the building, and by the way, there are ways to, I'm not sure if this would work at a building that's viewed as non-contributing, but there are special permits available through Landmarks when you restore a historic structure. So maybe you combine with the adjoining property and restore that one. Those kinds of things. There are ways to get other forms of relief here. Certainly the use group 6 on the ground floor you can get through city planning, right? So, I mean, I could see a rear yard waiver, but I'm having trouble with all of these waivers, and I don't get how we get to use group 2. So, I don't know. What do others think?
I mean, I guess we're still sticking to that and not talking about shadow analysis.
Hey, talk about whatever you want. Right.
So, I mean, that was one of the questions I had on the shadow analysis as to how much the proposed building will have an impact compared to the as-of-right. The diagram is still a little confusing, but I get what they are showing, and I hope in future what typically one sees is that you show the shadow that has been cast by the as-of-right building in one color, and the proposed one in a dashed line over that, so that way we know how much one is overlapping the other one. Not looking at them side by side.
Right, yeah.
So I was looking at them side, I was able to blow them up and use some scaling, but it seems like the proposed building will not be casting a bigger shadow than the as-of-right. It seems the as-of-right is casting more shadow.
So that's the whole point. The increment is wrong. So you don't use an as-of-right that you could build today. You use that either the building is the way it is, or it's a vacant lot, which is, by the way, you're choosing which is your variance, right? You're choosing which is your hardship. Is it a vacant lot? Then it's the shadow compared to nothing. And is it that it's a obsolete building? Then you're comparing it to the existing 3-story structure. And so obviously there's going to be an incremental shadow. Is it a big deal? I don't know. Is it affecting a sensitive resource? That's a whole other subject, right?
Did they give us an updated uniqueness study about the lot? Because I couldn't find it. I only found the conclusions about the non-clustering, but I didn't see it.
I was just looking at the non-clustering. That was one of the things that we had asked it to clarify.
It was just
we did,
about the
because-
clustering.
Right, because I had asked, I think I had asked that question, because it seemed as if the ones to the east were smaller, or at least the same size.
Right. So all they submitted, because I did the same thing, I was like, where in the world is this uniqueness study? And then I realized, no, it's just that little map showing, here's where the sites that we're reviewing are located. They're not clustered, and they're located far away from this site, right? But I didn't find it useful, because I needed to go back to the original uniqueness study to see what the listing of the sites were, and then go look at this new map and see if there was something that I learned that was new, right? And then didn't agree that there's no clustering, because right on that very block, there's
It
clustering.
still looks like there's clustering.
Yeah. So did you have comments about the?
I have financial comments, but I was wondering if Commissioner Shetta
Yeah, okay.
had questions on obsolescence and stuff like that, and construction costs
Okay.
that he wanted to get to before I
Okay.
went to mine.
Yeah, regarding the obsolescence, I did ask last hearing for an engineering report indicating that the structural stability of the building is in question, and they provided us with a report from Ray Engineering saying that the building is structurally deteriorating, and I'm okay with that. I cannot do much criticism to it, so it is what it is.
So when you mean it is what it is, because I'm trying to understand, if you only see that the floor is 1 inch out of plumb, according to that, they
No,
have to
they
tear
are
down
talking,
my building.
they are talking about the wall bearing elements. They are saying that they cannot support the gravity loads. They are talking about the foundation. They are saying that,
Gravity loads of adding floors to it.
yes,
But what about the idea that the building is structured? So that's the question, right? So this building has to be unique in the sense that the building has to come down, right? Therefore, a vacant lot. All the buildings on the block are 3-story buildings, probably built around the same time period. So this building has to be in worse shape than those, and this building needs to come down in order to justify the vacant lot. So it's not a question of, can it support additional floors, is, can it not be structurally modified to become stable if it's in fact unstable? And could you, for instance, drop new columns down to add a floor or something,
they discussed that. They said they believe that, like, adding structural elements to the building to make it stable, in good shape, comply with the building code, is going to be more expensive than knocking down the building and putting a new.
But it's always more, these are historic properties. It's always more expensive to maintain a historic property, right? So this is the part where there's the practicality aspect of it, where it's always cheaper to build a new building to restore an old one. But to maintain historic properties, you restore the old one. So if this had been considered a contributing building, landmarks wouldn't want to know about this
Yep.
unless they were shown that the building is in such deteriorated state that it cannot be restored. It's a very, very rare situation where landmarks comes to the conclusion that you can tear a building down that's considered contributing, right? So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, this building has to come down or it's going to fall down. And that's not what I saw from what, I understand it's cheaper. That's not really the question, I don't think.
They didn't provide, like, analysis that the building in its current conditions is falling down. They didn't mention that in the report. I didn't see it, I would say. But what they said is they are willing to add additional gravity loads to the building, and the building in its current condition cannot support, the structural elements of that building cannot support the additional load. And I agree with them. I did look at the test pits, the sketches they provided. I believe the wall bearing elements, the foundation, they cannot support any, like, additional loads, even maybe in their current condition. I didn't see much foundation. It's just the wall, and probably some places maybe you have, like, a very tiny concrete foundations, and some other places you do not. They didn't, of course, they didn't investigate or explore the entire building foundation. They just went to some spots and they did some test pits and they looked at it. So in its current condition, without any additional loads, I cannot tell from the report they provided. With regard to the additional loads, I believe making that building, like converting that building to be in a structurally sound condition is gonna be like,
Structurally sound to support more floors.
yes, to support more
Right.
floors, yes.
So I think that's my question about how you work the A threshold, right? Is the threshold that the building must be able to support more floors in order to be considered an existing obsolete building or an existing building or something. And then you're looking at an obsolete building, which is different than a vacant lot, right? So then you're looking at the costs related to adding floors and not to, and then you're comparing this building to other buildings and saying they're not obsolete, but this one is, because that's basically what this structural analysis is about, right? That the building can't handle more floors, therefore obsolete compared to, I don't know what, because I'm not sure why obsolete as a what.
Can I
I don't know if the threshold is can it handle more floors, because previously the threshold was it's obsolete, it's either going to be, it's falling down, or in order, there's so much that has to be done in order to comply with current code. But we never really talked about it's obsolete to handle the weight of more floors. We've talked about it's obsolete to handle the weight of a conforming use, like for instance, the floors can't handle the load of machinery if you're in an M district, but we haven't really talked about for a uniqueness finding that you can't handle additional floors. So if they want to extend the uniqueness finding to include that analysis, I think they have to show us cases where we've considered that prior as a uniqueness finding, because I think it's really, the question of obsolescence is basically, is it obsolescence or is it deferred maintenance? That's number one. And is it obsolescence in that nothing could be done to support a conforming use or the existing use that you have here? And so I know of one case that really stands out in my mind that was in Brooklyn, right by the Brooklyn Bridge, and they had an engineering report and accompanying narrative and photos that basically showed that, like, the floors were slanted, they were pulling away from the walls, like it was a situation where if you blew on it hard enough, the building's gonna come down, and so therefore, they had to remove it. So that's what I was kind of looking for.
Right, okay, right.
Can I step back? I mean, I'm trying to understand one issue here, and that is, this is before us because it's seeking a rear yard and the use variance.
For a new building.
Two use variants.
Two use variances in a
Forget
new
about
building.
how many use
Yeah,
variants.
okay.
I'm just saying, it's that, those are the things that it's before, it's before us. It could be built as of right. A new building can be built as of right on this. LPC has granted a new building to be built as of right. And why is, I'm just trying to understand, why are we then looking at the issue of whether the building can handle, existing building can handle the structure or not? Because that's because of the variance part of it, I get it, but
For the
LPC is completely
uniqueness part
okay.
of it.
Unique.
It's uniqueness, so don't go with what LPC says. You have to first determine that you are unique from the other small lots on that block that are underdeveloped. They have 3- and 4-story. So it's like, so you have to distinguish yourself from them.
Okay, now, as a chair mentioned, that some of those buildings have more of the characters that LPC would want to have them report. So fine, there are buildings that are on those blocks that are probably from the same period, that are also on shallow lots, but we're going to treat each one of those sites differently based on how they come to us, based on how LPC reviews it, because maybe they add more to the neighborhood character, the historic character of that building, and therefore LPC may not want to have them tear them down, may want some other sets of requirements that, in this
Actually,
case,
to me, the
they
fact that
have-
LPC is telling them they could tear it down is a
It's a
benefit.
boon.
That,
Yes.
that
It's a
puts them
benefit.
well above those guys next
Yeah.
to them. It makes
Yes.
it doubtful that they could qualify for a
Okay.
variance.
Right, but that's my question. You're talking about the uniqueness, and I'm trying, the uniqueness of this site compared to all the issue of the cluster, I'm still a little befuddled, because those sites are not before us, and those sites, if they were to be before us, they would be before, based on LPC's determination and whether.
No,
LPC would determine
not
also.
at all based on LPC. So we're not allowed to take into account LPC's anything, right? Because that would put all properties within historic districts at some threshold of a variance. So we're not actually allowed to look at that at all. I'm
Understood.
only raising it because LPC said you can tear this building down, and they were using that as the explanation for how bad off the building is. And I was clarifying, no, the certificate of appropriateness said it's not a contributing building in the district, so tear it down if you want to. And we're okay with what you want to replace it with, right? But we don't take into account LPC's allowance, not allowance, and sometimes you can make an argument with LPC that a building isn't contributing even though they found it was contributing. So,
Even if we did, it'd have to be uniqueness to its detriment, and that wouldn't be to its detriment, that they could tear it down.
right.
And I think this arose out of the conversation that they want to be known first as a narrow, shallow lot with an obsolete building. If they took out that whole conversation and said we're just a narrow, shallow lot, vacant, then don't talk about building obsolescence.
But
But then
they
you might
aren't
not be able
vacant.
to distinguish yourself as being unique or unique with a hardship. It's a whole nother conversation. But once you're talking about obsolescence, then you have to talk about current obsolescence, not obsolescence for future uses and for future variance granted uses.
Right. But in addition to which, this is not a vacant lot. And on 19th Street, we had an enormous amount of trouble with the fact that they tore down a building that wasn't clearly something that should have been torn down, and they claimed that the building was in such terrible shape it had to go. They never were able to show us that it was in such terrible shape that they had to go. And so they created this vacant lot and then claimed uniqueness about the vacant lot. So we had huge pushback because we were so uncertain that they really had established fairly the vacant lot uniqueness finding. They tore the building down kind of in the middle of the night version of it. They're not supposed to do that before coming to us, right? And so there's this building standing, looks just like all of its neighbors in the row. It's just got its 1980s facade, an ugly 1980s facade, not the whole thing, by the way. And so when you look at it, you don't really see that it's differently situated than all of its neighbors. That's the problem. And so how do you prove it's differently situated as an obsolete building? Something about it. And we had another one of these obsolescence arguments, the chocolate factory
Right.
in Hudson Square, where as they came, first they talked to us about it had these party walls that were very thick, and it prevented movement between the two sides. So that was something that made it difficult to be used for conforming use, right? That was one. But then in the course of the hearings, they did more studies, and they found that the facade was peeling off of the front and had to be removed. So that was a situation where, whoa, major costs associated with a building that is just not doing its thing anymore, and the facade had to be removed and had to be replaced with a new facade, and also, I forget whether that was a historic district or not. So, and then at great expense, because it has to go through, it has to be a higher end renovation, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, normally I look at these sites and they're little sites. So normally, when it's just a simple vacant lot, it's easy to say, vacant lot, shallow site, yes, something. But here, it's not a vacant lot. So, and it doesn't mean you automatically have the right to max out your FAR. Historic district buildings never get to max out their FAR, or rarely, right? So those guys down the street are all worse off. So,
Do you want to share your financial comments? or-
Yeah, regarding the
Still going.
cost estimate, the cost estimate is like usual, no details at all, just numbers. I did look at the engineering report, like I said, they dug some test pits in the building around the foundation. I didn't see any groundwater in these test pits, although the construction cost estimates still have like dewatering for the azofrite and all the other proposed scenarios. The azofrite unit prices, I did look at them, and all the proposed scenarios, the construction cost for them, all the unit prices are higher by 15 to 20%. I don't know why. The azofrite building and the other two proposed buildings are more or less the same, almost the same. For example, the concrete for the foundation, for the azofrite, it's 1,200 per cubic yard. For the proposed, it's 1,500 per cubic yard. I don't know why. What is the difference between this and that? They are using mat foundation. Again, we don't have geotechnical report. We need geotechnical report for that. We need the foundation drawings based on which the structure engineer has recommended using a mat foundation. They are using shoring. In the structural report, the structure engineer says if they keep the two-party walls and they construct on these. So my understanding, if they gonna remove the existing building, they gonna have a hole already, so they don't need shoring or excavation support in place. They are using shoring, so I'm not sure where from this is coming.
is that the assumption that the foundations are too shallow next door? Something like that?
If the foundation next door, if the buildings next door have basements that are deep enough, they don't need excavation support. And that's what I asked for actually last hearing. I said, give me the existing conditions for the surrounding buildings. So if they are going to put their basement at 10 feet below sidewalk and the surrounding buildings are 10 feet or more, that's it. They don't need any excavation support system in place. Like I said, they have many duplicate cost elements, like the staircases. They have them in concrete and steel, and the price for this is about $30,000. The unit prices, like I said, are generally, I went over like every single cost item in the proposed for the 14-foot rear yard and for the 19, for these two scenarios, 15 to 20% higher than the azofrite. So they need to fix that. And before they fix, they need to give us details of these quantities. I'm not gonna take, structural steel is 48 tons. How did you get to that? I need the details for that.
Okay, so financials, they now have included the two lesser variance scenarios that we requested, the 16-foot rear yard and the 19-foot rear yard. The difference between the lesser variances and the proposed are that the lesser variances have a full ground floor and full cellar, and then pull back for the residential uses. So I had asked for more updated site value comparables, and they gave me more updated land comparables for the site value, and it just slightly raised the site value, and they were comparables that were located in Chelsea and Midtown South and the Flatiron area, and they were adjusted for location. I found the adjustments were fine. They gave me new retail comps. Now, my original comment had to do with making sure that the size adjustments for the comparables went the right way, as in, if the comparables were smaller comparables than the site, then they should be adjusted downward, because larger sites lease for less per square foot. And then if the comparables were larger, then vice versa, then it should be a positive adjustment. However, now I have new comparables. All of the spaces are now smaller than the subject, with no adjustments for size, except for the last comparable, which is larger, but it does have an appropriate adjustment for size and adjustment upwards. Not all of the new comparables are even legal retail. Comp number 2, 81 Sullivan Street, has a one-story apartment on that first floor as per the C of O. And then they're not all on the first floor still. Comp number 3, West Houston Street, actually has a basement store on the C of O. So not only are the comparables much smaller at 600, 700 square feet sites, and especially when you're considering the lesser variances that have a full ground floor as well as a full cellar, I don't think it's an appropriate comparable, because it's a fraction of the size of what you're actually going to have there. So I still need them to update their retail comparables and give me comparables that are more like what you're going to see in the lesser variances, as well as the proposed. For the condominium comparables, they gave me new comparables for all of the sizes. However, the one-bedroom comparables are still smaller than the one-bedroom that's proposed in any of the scenarios. One of the comparables to me is very far away, Norfolk Street, and Norfolk Street is almost like south of the Lower East Side, and I'm not sure that that operates the same way, and there's no locational adjustment for that. I feel that the subject property is definitely in a better location. Likewise, with the 3-bedroom comparables, the Mott Street comparable is too far away, and it also doesn't have a locational adjustment. And so the result is the 1-bedroom comparables actually raised the price per square foot for the 1-bedroom sale, but the 3-bedroom comparables actually lowered the price per square foot for the 3-bedroom apartment. Now, the 4-bedroom comparables, they also lowered the price per square foot for the 4-bedroom apartment from before. However, the comps are really nice apartments. They are superior to what you're going to see at the subject site, and they actually have many amenities and superior views, and so they are properly adjusted down to account for that. They also have a private terrace, but it's not the only amenity. So I'm okay with them adjusting downwards and including the private terrace as the amenity, whereas I had raised a question about that before. My only question about those, the comparables, well, not really so much the comparables, but actually their layout of prices, is that their outdoor space in the proposed is valued at $1,175 a square foot, which is 50% of the indoor space on that top apartment. But for the lesser variances, that outdoor space, which is only slightly smaller than in the proposed, are valued at $330 a square foot, which is 15% of the indoor space. And that really amounts to a loss of as much as $300,000 in sales price for that large apartment in the lesser variances, and actually impacts the bottom line when you talk about how feasible it would be to have the lesser variance. So I think that minimum variance really is still a question here. It hasn't been determined yet, precisely because I have not been convinced by the retail income, and I'm not convinced yet at the condo sales prices, simply because of the outdoor space. And it really isn't a good answer to just come back and value everything at 15% of indoor space, because then we're going to get into a conversation as to whether 15% of indoor space is appropriate when we've actually seen articles that say 25 to 50%. So I really don't want to just have that quick pat answer, which just lowers the income of everything.
Without a conversation, without a comments at least, the explanation for why you picked that.
Right, exactly. So if they were to make the adjustments that add in the income to the condominium sales and raise the income for the retail, then the 16-foot rear yard definitely would work. And so I think that the proposed would be an overshoot in that case. Now, if they also make adjustments downward on the development costs, according to Commissioner Schett's questions and suggestions, then possibly even the 19-foot rear yard would work. So I would say let's wait and see, but they're not there yet.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Item number
18.
18, 2016-4275 BZ, 13215 14th Avenue, Queens.
Okay, we received DOI. We do need fire department sign off. There's, as we discussed at the last hearing, there's a letter stating that they couldn't get fire department fire alarm approval without BSA approval. But we've had for the last few months an arrangement whereby we send a letter to DOB and fire department, and with that, they'll issue a permit. And this letter was issued for this application on June 12th. So things should be rolling according to that letter. With respect to ADA access from the first to the cellar floor within the building, this is proposed via chairlift. It should be installed before we decide on the application. This is legalization, so that's why. There was an alteration type 2 application that's been amended to include that. Anybody else?
Good. Item number 19, 2017-9 BZ, 561, 565 Utica Avenue, the Brooklyn.
Okay. All right, just jumping in. The drawings I didn't find show the clear separated distance between the front door of the daycare center and the front door of the Sundance Center, which is called an adult daycare. There's a middle door that's close to the elevator lobby that's for Sundance that should be used for emergency egress only from the daycare center. It reads like the main entrance at the facade. And so it's confusing. I actually don't know which is the front door to this daycare center because there's two identical looking doors. And the fire stair from the second floor, which is Sundance, that's adjacent to the main entrance to the daycare, should only be used for emergency egress as well. So they need to be labeled that way and locks put on them that are the right way. So that means the landlord has to cooperate in coordinating this. I'd like to know why the private office front at the daycare center has direct access to the fire stair, and there's actually a door that opens into the fire stair from the private office. That wouldn't work anyway because the landings are at a different level than the office. It's quite strange. The door itself is labeled exit from that office, which makes no sense at all, but I think actually they're thinking of putting a storage closet under the fire stair, which is also really not allowed. So I think they just have to take out that door.
I believe it's not gonna open. It's the
Yeah.
landing itself is kind of low, so
Right,
the
right,
door
and you're-
cannot exist.
The door won't exist. You couldn't get to the landing if you wanted to anyway. It's kind of like being John Malkovich. It's like a half floor, right? So that's a mistake. So just take that door out.
I think it's for the
Actually-
storage
actually,
access
they
under
described
that
that.
landing.
Not
because the-
allowed, not allowed.
No, I understand, it's
Yeah.
not allowed, but it's not, because the ground is quite flat. There
Yeah.
isn't that much of an elevation change. So
No, there's
I
no way.
read it more as a
There- There is no head to open that door, but I recall in the submission letter, the covering letter, they spoke about that, they said something about that door, and they said they added this door to do some sort of function, so they didn't just add it by mistake.
Okay, well,
I
they
believe
didn't
they-
think it through very much, though, I should say. Okay, and this is a general question, is everyone persuaded by the surrounding uses discussion and the distance from the children? That's what I wanted to check, if everyone was okay with that. I didn't see DEP sign off on noise and air quality. I don't know if there still isn't, okay, and I don't see notes on the drawings with respect to the acoustical fencing around the play yard. And also the fire alarm notes have to be standard BSA notes that refer to the central station connection. And the refrigerator trash storage that's described in the cover letter is also not shown on the plans.
It's, actually, I have a comment on that. In the original drawing, the office that we were talking about that has access to the stair, above or below, different matter, was the storage area. And the office space was located right at the main entrance, which is shown as now the
Oh, and
trash
why they
storage.
switch it.
I still think having an office space in the front
Yes.
is better, and using that storage space that was in the previous drawing as a trash space for two reasons. One is by having the office space right in front at the main entrance, it would be easier for them to monitor the comings and goings of parents and visitors, and also school drop-off and pickup, and all that monitoring would be much easier than having the trash. And it's also not a desirable space for you to have the trash enclosure right by the entrance. So I would recommend that they consider flipping it back to what was there originally, provided that that storage space meets the space requirement for the trash requirement, which I think it does, because I was looking at the size of it. It's, the storage space seems to be slightly bigger.
Yeah.
So one might be able to,
But I think that one reason they switched that, there's probably two reasons why they switched that to trash enclosure at the front. One is it's easier if the trash is closer to the street, because then you just bring it right outside.
Right.
And then the other is that at our last, because we had this experience on another case where the entrance to the daycare was far too close to the entrance for adults to the upper floor, and we asked them to separate the entrances very remotely. So if that was originally the location of that office too close, next to that middle entrance, that's far too close to the adult main entrance where the elevator is, right? But you could move it, that you could put that office almost anywhere. You could move that office to the other side near next to the fire stair, to the right. And then you'd have the same situation where you have an office with sort of a sentry type situation. The proportions are similar, the layout could be similar, they can move the corridor down a little bit. I mean, it seems to me that they could accomplish this, but I think that's the reason they probably switched the functions.
okay, understood.
That's a pretty wacky door opening into the fire stair. It's so illegal on so many levels, okay. Anybody else on this one? Okay.
Item number 27, I'm sorry, may I go on? 2017-56BZ, 1321 Richmond Road, Staten Island. This is being administratively adjourned.
Also, just want to note that the May 15th hearing was also adjourned. It's not in the
Yeah, right.
Item number 21, 2017-209BZ, 1622 East 29th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. With respect to, we had a threshold issue with respect to retention of 50% of the perimeter walls on the perimeter. The drawings provided don't describe that. There are no calculations, and the demo drawings are not prepared according to the model to indicate the joist retention methods, et cetera. The requested floor area actually went up when we discussed at the hearing that it was high for lots of this type in the neighborhood. And the front yard was reduced to 15 feet from 18'6", which it wasn't in the prior submission. So applicant needs to discuss how this reduction in the front yard fits within the neighborhood character. Those were my comments. Anybody else?
I think I had also asked that the drawings show the floor area in the attic space that has been counted towards the floor area.
Oh, they didn't do that? I thought they did. Okay.
Right.
I thought they did. No? With a shading that indicates the 8-foot ceiling? No? Okay. All right.
Item number 22, 2017-213BZ, 1808 Coney Island Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, the high school educational program was much more clearly described in this submission. I'm sorry that it took so long for this programmatic needs analysis to finally be made clear. And just as a reminder, in the notice of comments, the applicant was asked to do a programmatic needs analysis and instead wrote a really, really long email why one isn't necessary. Clearly one was necessary, and it took us, I think, 3 hearings to get to it. So, word to the wise. With respect to the scissor stair letter from the architect, The building is being characterized as, quote, alcohol and drug abuse rehabilitation center for building code purposes. But at the last hearing, the program director stated that it is not a rehab center for, however you pronounce it, OASAS purposes, since if it were, it would be, quote, a stabilization and rehabilitation service, and under OASAS rules, you would need 2 staffs per overnight shift. So they need to be very careful in their characterization, because for C of O purposes, this, they need to be careful, otherwise they may be forced to have overnight staff. So they also might be characterizing this instead as an adult home, which is a different occupancy group. But it's still an I1 occupancy type, which has the same egress requirements. And I note that had there been only 16 residents, the classification for egress might have been different. So it's 20 residents that throw it into a different egress situation. But I actually disagree with the architect's analysis that no portion of the exterior stairway may be left open under the building code. The rule is that that the exterior stair must be at least 10 feet from side lot lines and open to a yard. So the portion of the stair located on the lot line could be fire rated, leaving the portions located more than 11 feet from the lot line open. I actually have reached out to fire department to clarify for this particular situation. At the last hearing, there was mention that residents would use the stairway to hang out on, and that's the reason that they shouldn't be having an open stair. The reason I'm interested in the open stair is because it's clogging up with a very bulky object, the rear yard. So I'm wondering if, first of all, hanging out on a stairway is such a bad thing. So need more on that. And what if the stair had an open screen enclosure like we've seen on another application that's rather than being completely open, it keeps it lighter but still private, so that it's kind of some kind of perforated screening or something where it's not this massive brick box. And as I said, I'm focusing on this because the proposed building is very tall compared to the neighbors, and the stair enclosure makes it even bulkier and taller because it rises higher than the building. There's been no discussion at all of the height of the building relative to the neighborhood. This needs to be discussed. This was requested at the first hearing, actually. Also requested was information about the materials on the side elevations, which were also not provided. There's these teeny little elevations that are used for another purpose, but we don't have side elevations, which we requested, I think, 2 hearings ago. None of the sections or elevations depict the interior stairs roof bulkhead nor the elevator bulkhead. You need to show that, and the height should be as accurate as possible, and we need a roof plan. There's a lot of good reasons for showing the elevator bulkhead, and the stair bulkhead. One is that the Department of Buildings sends you right back here when they don't show that. And then you have to go for a letter of substantial compliance, and then we say, well, we're not sure that that's something that we can do by LSC, and then here we are back at a hearing. A noise and air quality submission was made on July 5th, so DEP needs time to complete its review.
They completed it.
They completed it?
They sent back more comments.
More comments?
Friday.
Okay. And then, what else? That's it. Anybody else?
So I'm satisfied with the clarification that has been provided with regards to the school definition and also the programmatic need. I disagree with you with regards to this needing for more changes to the stair bulkhead, and the reason being
The stair bulkhead or the stair?
Sorry, the stair. Well, I'm looking at when I'm saying bulkhead, it's what's being proposed to be extended.
No. Bulkhead is the thing.
I know that.
Is the
I
thing
know
on the
that.
roof. So
I
let's
know
just
that.
stay with, which
Okay,
one
the
are you
stair
talking
bulk-
about?
The stair bulk that is being proposed to be
The
extended.
bulk of the stair.
The
Okay.
bulk of the stair that's being proposed to be extended out. And I think looking at the context, at the context being very pristine, I would have asked for some modification. But in this case, there aren't none of the buildings on the C8 maintain the required 30-foot setback from the lot line. None of them do. And while they may not be as tall as the proposed building, they do encroach well beyond what this proposed building is proposing. So I am not I don't think by having this building have a more open staircase would make that appearance of that encroachment less. It has been maligned, if I were to use the word, quite a bit by all the existing users. So this is not, and this is a very narrow structure. I don't think an 8-foot, 10 wide structure that encroaches not all the way to the lot line. It still maintains an 11-foot rear yard from the property line, would necessarily be a significant negative impact. And I know we had asked for an open staircase and this was for a school that was on a corner lot that where the buildings on that frontage, I think it was Webster Street,
Yes,
had
Webster Avenue.
very uniform building design and had a pattern, whereas here, none of the buildings have that uniform building design or form or shape that one should be continued here. And in that one, because the staircase was being proposed in the front, we were more concerned about how it was going to change the complete building appearance of it. And therefore, we wanted it to be as transparent and open as possible to minimize the look of it and try to make it similar to like the fire stairs, that open fire stairs the other buildings had. Here, we don't have that, and this is in the rear. And like I said, all the buildings they're built almost to the lot line. Maybe some have, may have a few feet from the distance. So I'm not sure how much of a neighborhood improvement we would see if this were an open frame kind of staircase as opposed to an enclosed staircase. I mean, there might be a way to design the facade that can be more playful and can make it appear less, but I'm not sure it would make much of a difference.
I guess part of it is that there's a vacant lot next door to this site, but the reality is that vacant lot, which is really used for parking.
But
that
that's a
vacant
C8
lot,
zone, right?
No, but that vacant lot is the side where you'd have to have a wall, because that's the side that has to have the fire separation. So
Right.
the lighter aspect of it would be viewed from above the short build. There's a lot of short buildings next to this, right? The buildings are only 2 and 3 stories tall adjacent. So you'll
Right.
see the staircase from quite a distance. That's the reason that I was looking at it, because the building is so much taller than all the other.
That's a vacant building, and we don't know what the future development plans would be.
No,
on
not the
that.
vacant lot, because the vacant lot, shared property line with the vacant lot, that wall, because the staircase is up against that lot line, has to be solid.
Right.
So that's not the side that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the view from
I know what you
from
mean.
the other streets where you can see over the short buildings to this building.
And that's really, I was less concerned about the wall on the vacant. I was more concerned about, I thought you were concerned about how it would be viewed from the residential area.
Yeah, that and also
So-
from the street.
Well, okay, so first of all, from any of the buildings that are, the residential buildings that are backing against it, they are quite high and they're quite bulky. And they are much wider in their footprint than this existing building. So yes, you would see the staircase from behind if you're standing on the street, but I don't think by making it appear open in a trellis-like structure or so would make much of a change in the neighborhood character, because all the other buildings are built to the lot line and they're as visible. This is actually moved away. So, and there are trees, there are other things that are blocking the view. So I'm not quite sure at the end of the day, this is going to have a significant impact, or it's going to look completely out of context from that street that is parallel to Coney Island,
That's
Coney Island
10th.
Avenue.
East 10th.
From 10th Street. And I went around that block and I was trying to visualize it, and I didn't see, I mean, the profile of it is going to be so thin that I don't think it's going to be that perceptible. That's just my take.
Okay. Anybody else?
My issue had to do with the threshold issue of qualifying as an educational program, and I felt that that was satisfied. I think that the narrowness of the site really makes it so that you kind of have no choice but to put that stair in the rear. And I personally would prefer, if I lived there, to look at uniform construction material myself. So if it was all brick and all closed, I would prefer that. Of course, it's just me, but I don't think that an open stair necessarily would make it look better. I certainly would be concerned about the sounds emanating of teenagers, so I probably would prefer to have it closed. So I'm okay with it as I see it.
Okay. Anybody else on this? No?
Move on. Item number 23, 2017-291BZ, 1367 East 26th Street, Brooklyn. This is adjourned. Item number 24, 2017-292BZ, 1363 East 26th Street, Brooklyn. This is also adjourned.
Correct.
Also, just to note, these two are heard together. At last hearing, they were heard together, so.
Yeah, because, aren't
They're the semi-detached
Yeah, they're
buildings.
Actually, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're not the same application, but they were heard together.
Yes, sorry. Thank
Yeah.
you. New cases, item number 1, 2017-149BZ, 510 Quincy Street, Brooklyn.
we have proof of service of initial hearing to officials, yeah, I have a note that says, notice was properly served.
Yep.
Community board review was problematic in that it held a vote of the full board on November 7th, 2017, and the vote failed at 15 to approve, 15 to deny, and 2 abstentions. So I'd like to know what was that about, because it failed, right? They held a revote on November 21 and voted to approve with 24 in favor, 5 opposed, and 3 abstentions. There is no explanation for this voting record, which seems to have completely flipped. Applicant needs to explain what happened, and also, I suggest we reach out to the community board to follow up with that. This is a special permit to allow elimination of existing required parking for existing income-restricted housing units as defined in the zoning resolution, and construction of a new affordable housing project. Because the project's parking was provided pursuant to section 25-25, it meets the zoning resolution definition for income-restricted housing units. A map was provided to show that the site is within the transit zone as required by the special permit. I note that in this case, actual rent restrictions under HUD contract is under a HUD contract and a deed for 192 low-income units that expires in exactly 8 years. The statement of facts describes the funding structure of the new project, but states, quote, assuming that the new project is financed as presently contemplated, unquote, certain regulatory agreements would apply to the site. So I'd like to know, what is funding going to be changed to, for example? Is it going to be a standard bank loan? A lot of this is about the future of the affordability of the housing, because the public policy purpose of this special permit was to continue affordable housing and, or income-restricted housing. And if it's about to sunset, then what are we getting in exchange for this? So there would be no regulatory agreement if there were a bank loan applying to the development site that is being made available through the special permit. And restricting all of the units in the building to affordable rents for families at less than or equal to 100% of AMI, of which 52% of the units are income-restricted housing units, was part of the purpose of the special permit. With respect to parking needs, if the regulated rents in the existing building expire in 8 years, and the build year is 2 years from now, And in 5 years, there's a potential that tenants with automobile ownership will move into the existing buildings. I'd like to know how that'll affect the parking demand. A poll of tenants and car ownership was provided, and unless there are duplicates, our file shows 90 households surveyed with 22 cars owned. There were duplicates, but I kind of corrected for a couple that I found, and wasn't sure if there were others, right? So that's 24% car ownership. I like them to verify because, like, it's not that they did the math for us, right? So I'd like to know, is that estimate consistent with assumptions, and why don't these people park their cars on the lot? What's the cost of the lot? I seem to remember hearing somewhere in the
$50 a
application.
month. It's $50 a month per space.
50 a month? Oh, you found that, okay.
Yeah.
And, which is pretty reasonable to me. So I seem to remember hearing, maybe it was in the application processing phase or something, that there was construction on the parking lot that had displaced the parked cars. So something like scaffolding or something like that on the parking lot. I'd like to know what the status is with that, and were the spaces offered back to the tenants after construction was removed, construction materials were removed. The study showed only 5 spaces used, but 20% of the total seemed to have been the standard on other lots. So it's very low for the comparison lots. In any event, the shortfall described with other studies show adequate on-street parking spaces available. I'll talk between saws. And the public policy here is to build more affordable housing. Some documents were provided with the application that have not been explained in the statement of facts. A New York City lease rider for rent-stabilized apartments, the HCR fact sheet, we don't know what that is. Please explain the significance of the HPD letter to DOB dated 4/12/17. I'd like to know whether annual filings with HUD had been made pursuant to the terms of the deed. There's also a tallying of tenants in both buildings as of 2017 that is broken down into rent-stabilized, HPD, New York City Housing Authority, and vacant units. I'd like to know where these various categories fit within, under the HUD contract, and what's the status of the 39 rent-stabilized tenants in terms of their current rents? Why are there only 95 units listed in total between the two buildings when there are 192 units in the two buildings? I thought that, something wasn't matching with the data.
Yeah, there were some inconsistencies in the numbers when it was describing one building over the other. I think it needs to be put together as one.
Yes.
When
yeah.
describing the existing building.
Right. And then, so a question, is 510 Quincy actually 510 to 522 Quincy? That's part of it. The addresses didn't jibe somehow. And is 651 to 671 Gates actually 671 to 685 Gates? That was that. So the addresses don't match. Then the set includes several site plans, 2 of which seem to be corrupted as they don't show all of the 28 parking spaces. It's called BSA 2 and BSA 7. And is new landscaping of the existing play area part of the project description? And then a phase 2 was submitted on July 5th, so needs DEP review. I don't know if it was reviewed. Other comments?
My comments were 2. One was that the parking numbers was not consistent in the plan. I think they were showing the one large plan, and one side said 18 and the other was going to be the remaining, but somehow that remaining number never carried out. I don't think they need to break it up. They should just use the total number. The other question was with regards to the playground, since that's not, I don't know if that's before us or that's going to be revised as part of the plan, and that's for HPD or HUD to review. And because that's not before us, we cannot grant a playground anyway, right?
Well, we can have the playground shown on the drawings.
Right, but that's not a grant that we can give. that's.
Well, it's not a grant that's needed, this is the as-of-right project, right? What's not as-of-right is the parking reduction.
Right, no, I understand, but the open space that is being proposed, that would be contrary to whatever plan HUD would have approved before. So I'm assuming they must have gotten an approval for that open space.
It's going to be on the, it's going to be on the parking lot.
Yeah.
So once we say
There is
they
already
can
an
have
open
a.
space, there is already an open space. There is one that has always existed, that was for the resident. And there is another one that was built few years ago, if I remember, because I did these site visits many years ago when I was at HPD. And that was done to provide open space for the school.
Right, but this playground is not, it's not a requirement. It's
No,
not a
it's
zoning
not.
requirement.
No.
And so they've satisfied their open space
Yeah.
already. So once we say, if we say, you don't need the parking spaces, then
And the playground.
whatever they
goes
want to do with
Okay.
that space that
Yeah.
had spaces is
That's-
fine.
It's just that one of the findings about this is that improves the site plan, right? So it enables the site plan. So on some of these other ones, we look at how they're building a building on the site and they displaced recreation space. So then it's fair to ask what happened to the recreation space, right?
Okay, now I understand where
Right.
your question is coming from.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think in that case, they've been very responsive to providing enough of a buffer between the parking and the existing open space and recreation areas.
My only concern was to what would happen to the existing units after 2026,
Right. So that's my,
because that impacts the demand, just like you had stated.
right.
And this is something we may want to find out a little bit from HPD, because if they're going to grant this, I wonder if they have already started some initial discussions with the existing buildings, and if they would go through some other HPD preservation finance programs or not.
Well, the way that it was
Typically,
reading
yeah.
was, we're taking this off and it goes market, because yay, it goes free, it becomes free in 2026. Well, that was the way the text was reading. We're not going to be regulated after 2026, and the new building that's going to be constructed will be providing,
Affordability till
Affordability.
2048.
right. But my understanding of the sort of public policy purpose is, the reason you care that it's income restricted units in the existing building is because you're increasing the number of units, you're preserving those,
Right.
and you're adding new. So yay, we have a net increase. In this case, there's a net decrease. In 2026, when they fall off the charts, the new building, it has fewer low-income units than the old building. So what did we gain? We gave them a special permit to build on here, but we lost a significant amount of affordable units, and that doesn't seem to me the purpose of this.
And I don't think that meets.
Except that we would lose those anyway.
We would lose them anyway.
We would lose them anyway.
No, we wouldn't lose them anyway. Had they, oh, I see.
We would lose them
It
anyway.
would just
They're
sit there being
sunsetting in
parking.
2026.
Regardless of whether
Yeah,
you
so
grant this
those
permit.
have the possibility to be totally lost whether or not you build this building.
Right. That's true.
But isn't one of the, and I have to look at the
So-
zoning resolution requirements, isn't one of the requirements is to make sure that you provide equal or, no?
No.
There's no requirement about the number of affordable housing units you retain, preserve, or create under the special program.
It's frankly really badly written.
It's very broadly written.
Yeah, broadly. I say badly, she said broadly. Let's just say it doesn't do what we thought it would do in words. Anyway, any other comments on this one? Okay.
Item number 2, 2017-279, 97 North 10th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. We have 2 letters in support. We have DOI. We need fire department sign off because it's a legalization. It opened in July of last year. And, what? I didn't see a fire department okay letter. Maybe we did, I didn't see it. And I'm just giving a note to our council. There's a separate set of sound attenuation drawings that need to be incorporated into the main set. And other than that,
Do we need the community board vote?
I contacted the community board, and they said that they were okay, but I didn't get the minutes, and they said they sent it, and I hadn't seen it. They had sent it after the vote had happened. The fire department letter came in, what date was it, July 20th.
Oh, okay.
It says that the application is filed, the application is filed with the DOB and the fire department for the fire alarm system has been approved, and an inspection was performed for the fire alarm system, which covers the entire building by the fire alarm inspection unit, and a letter of defect was issued to the building owner on June 15th. I've informed the unit that these open items for fire alarm system and will request that they re-inspect the premises and issue appropriate violation orders after the owner has sufficient time to complete the necessary repairs. A new sprinkler system and standpipe system was also installed, inspected, and signed off by a licensed fire suppression contractor. The fire department is responsible for inspecting these systems every 5 years, which is scheduled to perform in July of 2023. The Bureau of Fire Prevention units have been notified of this application before the board and will take the necessary actions if the fire suppression and fire alarm are not being maintained. This agency has no additional comments or recommendations relative to this application.
Okay, in other words, we're okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Item number 3, do we want to call them both together?
Yeah.
3 and 4? Okay. Item number 3, 25206BZ, 1761 Walton Avenue, the Bronx. And item number 4, 2017-289BZ, 1761 Walton Avenue, the Bronx.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board 5 recommended approval with 16 in favor, 1 opposed, and 2 abstentions that I think should have been recusals because it sends that 2 of the people on the board are on the board of Mount Hope. That should have actually been a recusal because an abstention sounds like a no vote. Sorry, scrolling. Okay. The project meets the criteria for the special permit with respect to income restrictions and height limitations, and this has to do with the bulk waiver request for the housing. Massing-wise, this is again about the housing. Massing-wise, I'd like them to explain the reason for the partial setback at the 11th floor that exceeds the maximum base height allowed under the special permit and under sections 23-664. If they somehow think this is meeting the dormer rule, I'd like to have them explain it, because it's a 3-story dormer, and I don't get that. So, and this has to do with the variance. So I actually remember this application very well from several pre-application meetings where I expressed concern that the housing developer was usurping the needs of the community center by replacing expressed needed gymnasium space with meter rooms, lobbies, and a single apartment, and that the two needed to work in balance together. And at that pre-app meeting, I was very aware, for one, the first pre-app meeting, the representative of the director of the community center did not appear. And so we said, well, wait a minute, you can't, you've got opposing interests here, both of you, both the housing developer and the community center director have to appear at these meetings. So at the next meeting, the director came and was surprised to learn that he could actually push back on the developer, because this is a developer that does affordable housing, but it's not a not-for-profit housing developer, right? So, so there had to be give and take between them. And so this is a big concern of mine. So I want to be sure, first of all, that the director from Mount Hope attends all of these hearings, The resolution with respect to that makes clear that the rear yard waivers, which were the only waivers sought by the community center, were to accommodate a regulation-sized gymnasium, and that it could not fit on the corner lot where there is no rear yard requirement or on the interior lot. So I want to understand why the programmatic needs of the community center changed so dramatically. If we compare the cellar and first floor plan of the approved 2007 variance application to the proposed, it's clear that the basketball court has been reduced so significantly that it is anywhere near regulation size. We see many basketball courts for schools, high schools, and regulation sizes are always a minimum court width of 50 feet and typical length of 84 feet, and I believe that's absent the area for the bleachers and the overrun, or whatever that's actually called. We also are told that there's a minimum safe dimension for that. I'm calling it overrun, but I can't remember what basketball players call it. Where if you're too close to the wall, it's actually dangerous. And I saw 3 feet being used in some discussions, but I know at the schools, they said 3 feet's really bad because by 3 feet, you've smashed into the wall. So it needs to be more like 5 or 7 feet or something. I don't remember what it is. The proposed court is only 33 by 56, so it looks like Mount Hope is giving up its regulation-size court, and I'd like to know whether it knows that, because it doesn't have its own architects working on this. It's the developer of the housing that is doing the drawings, right? And I'd like to know how it fulfills its programmatic needs with what they're being given now. A basketball, I don't know, I guess it's like hoop practice or something. I'm not really even sure what you use this for. And then there's another room that's called a multipurpose room. Again, that's for, yoga classes, but that's not at all what the original programmatic needs were. And then just going into the environmental review, Phase 2 work plan was submitted on July 10th. DCP signed off on the community facility review, and Parks Department on April 2nd had comments with respect to open space and shadows, which I can read, or they need to just check. Other comments on this?
Oh, I had questions about the outdoor recreation area on top, on the second floor in the rear. What are they used for? What's the distance from the existing residential windows in the lot behind? And is there going to be sound attenuation?
I think that's for the residents, right?
Yeah.
I think overall comment is that when they're going through each one of the findings of 73-623, they need to talk about not just the recreation facility, but also the residential building, and be more elaborate about each one of them. Like, for example, not blocking access to light and air. I think in that they probably need to use the shadow analysis to show how the existing, the proposed building will not create that much of an impact, and talk about the surrounding context, which has very tall buildings, and most of those are affordable housing that's being built through HPD financing, I might say. And they, so it's not like this, if they're making the argument, it's in context, they need to use the surrounding context, describe it, provide a little bit more maps with heights of the buildings and uses to kind of help us make those arguments. Right now, I think the finding section, it's weak, and it's only focusing on the recreation, and it needs to talk about both of them. I think I'm not going to say more than that. I'll see if I have. I generally don't have an issue with it, but I just want them to flush those details out.
Okay.
And the other thing I want to confirm is that, as you mentioned, the original recreation center needed 2 waivers. One was the rear yard equivalent, and the other one was the rear yard encroachment. And if I understand it correctly, it does not any longer need the rear yard encroachment waiver, because the rec facility, the multipurpose fitness room, it's going to be well below the height of 23 feet.
But it's not that. This is an area where now it needs to be related to a school or a house of worship. if I remember that correctly. So you're not allowed any longer to have a community facility that's 23.
If
under
that's the
23
case, then the
feet.
graphics that has been included,
Unless it's a split lot, but
I need to look at this is because it wasn't clear, and that's why I'm asking this
Oh.
question. I think the graphic did not, it showed as part of the original approval, but as part of the proposed, it did not carry the existing, and let me just pull this up, the revised proposal.
so they should really clarify the waiver.
Yeah, see, it shows in highlight, the blues are the existing rear yard waiver, but if that's the case, then the existing rear yard encroachment in the rear of that interior portion needs to also be indicated here. So right now, it's not shown, so I thought it's not needed.
Yeah,
So,
that's, okay, just, they should need to clarify, okay. Uh-huh. Yeah, I don't know what the gray means, so, what's
the gray means zoning lot.
oh, that's not helpful.
Yeah, the entire gray area is the zoning lot, the blues are the existing waivers, the red is that not meeting the 50-foot
Yeah, yeah.
distance,
Okay.
and the rest of the green is the height and setback waiver.
Okay, other comments? No? Okay,
Item number 5, 2018-20BZ, 2801 Avenue N, Brooklyn. This is the same thing.
we have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval. We have one letter in support. There are no issues about retention of adequate existing material. This is an extension vertically and horizontally from the existing building. However, I do have to say that it's an extremely awkward enlargement at the attic level, and I don't understand even what it's for, because the usable space at the attic is just bizarre. The house starts off, the existing house is well-balanced in a row of similarly designed houses and is completely thrown off by this odd half-width rooftop addition. I just have to say, can you improve the design? I mean, you're supposed to be doing designs here, not just throwing junk on a roof. And so I have to say that, I mean, I wanted to use worse adjectives, but there's architecture that's supposed to be produced in New York that appears before the Board of Standards and Appeals and all of that stuff, and this is not architecture. This is throwing a shed on a roof. So I like them to provide an axonometrics that are with, that eliminate the sky exposure plane, because it conceals what's going on the roof. And the axonometrics need to be from 3 sides. But really, before providing the axonometrics, they need to actually design this as opposed to throwing this thing on the roof. I just thought it was insulting, frankly. I mean, clients don't understand what they're getting until after it's built. Any other comments?
My only concern with the attic was that it's a straight line extension of the side lot line, where the side lot, the building has a 2-foot 10-inch side yard. So I just wanted to know what was the distance between the existing building and the building next to it, fronting Avenue M, and just want to make sure that straight extension of that side wall from a neighborhood context, it's going to be okay.
In terms of distance between the
In
two
terms of
buildings?
the distance, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what's weird about this is it's a corner lot, so there's the front yard regulations that push, and we don't have any authority to waive the front yard regulations, right? But that doesn't mean you just draw some lines and you fill it in with a building. You
I think
design it,
They've been
right?
very responsive to that corner lot situation, like the attic has been further set back with various, indentations and everything on the top floor, so which reduces the bulk on 26th Street, I think, right, that's the street in front.
They built what's known as a zoning envelope.
True, but at least on 28th Street, the amount of encroachment of the attic space has been reduced significantly,
Only because they don't have the right to.
so.
So the front yards push, the attic is literally They drew a line where the lot, where it's allowed to have a front, where the front yard must set back, and then they rose and they put a little hat on, they put a roof on it. And meanwhile, there are dormers, there are all kinds of architectural methodologies for dealing with the addition to a roof where you could balance a building. This building started off being not a bad-looking, kind of more or less balanced building, and this actually looks like one of those terrible semi-attached detached buildings, semi-attached, where there's this monster on one roof and not on the other roof. It looks the same.
It does happen to you.
Yes. I'm no longer nice about it. When I see bad architecture, I have to say something. It's like part of my duty to my profession. And to the city. Okay.
Move on.
Yeah.
Item number 6, 2018-36BZ, 1482 East 26th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. We have proof of service of initial application to officials, but I actually didn't find notice of hearing. So please, 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 look at that. Community Board recommends approval. There are 4 letters in support. So this, on the other hand, is a straight line. So this is a semi-attached building, and this is a straight line extension into the rear yard of the semi-detached or attached home. And I really believe this is the correct way to be enlarging these houses, not by adding some monstrosity to the roof that throws off the balance with the attached neighbor. It is a much more respectful of the architecture and the neighborhood, and it's for this reason mainly that I agree with the reduction of the rear yard to 20 feet at both the first and second floors, which I want to make clear in the resolution. That's the reason. It's not because you can use this as a precedent for another one, and whether or not there are adjoining properties that have or don't have also 20-foot rear yards. It's because this is a semi-detached building, and there is no correct way to add to the building except by putting it in the back. And I think this was more or less the original intention of the special permit, to allow for the addition of a den and a bedroom or 2. And that's exactly what's happening here with relatively little impact on neighborhood character. So,
I thought the applicant was very, responded in the way that we have always raised the questions. They were very aware of the concerns, and they have put together a proposal that would, I guess, win our support, and I have no issues.
right, so if everybody with these semi-attached would come like this, we wouldn't be agonizing over, can you make a deal with your neighbor? Can you guys do it together? All that stuff. Okay. Anybody else?
The hearing notice was sent, no, it was sent June 28th from I have an email.
Okay,
I
so
went to sign.
I might not have seen it.
But it's not in, it's not in there, so somehow it
Oh, it's
didn't get
not
in
in
there.
Didn't get in.
Yeah, I have it. Don't worry, Jay, I have it. It just didn't go up, it didn't go into SharePoint for some reason.
Okay.
We got it, though.
All right. All right. It's Jealous Show.
Okay,
All the items together.
do we want to call them all together or separately, since they're different boroughs?
Your decision.
I'm going to
Okay.
present them all together.
All right, she'd rather present, but on tomorrow, we'll do this first, all of these
Yeah.
first. So, okay. We'll build it back tomorrow. Okay, so item number 7, 2018-110BZ, 17 Abbey Court, Brooklyn. Item number 8, 2018-111BZ, 18 Neutral Avenue, Staten Island. Item number 9, 2018-112BZ, 26 Millbank Road, Staten Island. Did we do this before?
No, it's a different milk bank.
Oh, okay. Item number 10, 2018-113BZ, 27 State Road, Queens. Item number 11 is 2018-114BZ, 394 Beach, 25th Street, Queens. And item number 12 is 2018-115BZ, 715 Cross Bay Boulevard, Queens.
Hi. So I just provided a handout for you to summarize information about these 6 applications. On the first page is, for your convenience and reference, the summary, the language of special 6492 special permit that all 6 applications are applying for. This special permit permits BSA to waive bulk regulations for the reconstruction of storm-damaged homes and has 3 findings, and height is permitted via finding B, and other bulk requirements are permitted to be waived via finding A, and via finding C, neighborhood character needs to be maintained. Below this special permit language is a summary of the waiver, the BSA rules that are being waived as part of this application.
Are being requested to be waived?
They're requested to be waived by the board if they decide to do so. This includes many different items, including hearing notice, a DOB objection, owner authorization. Owner authorization is done through the Build It Back program. So, and this has been waived for other applications. The second page has a summary of some aspects of the application. The Mayor's Office of Housing Recovery is the applicant. The important thing to note about all 6 properties is that the reason why they're at BSA is because the homes were over-elevated. And
What does that mean?
that means that there was a DOB-approved height that these homes needed to be elevated to, and these 6 homes were elevated more than 6 inches above the DOB-approved height, and therefore the existing non-compliances, which would have been grandfathered for some of these properties, not all of them, because some of them are being built in the exact same footprint, but the existing non-compliances, it's considered increasing the degree of non-compliance because of the over-elevation by DOB. And all 6 properties were sent to BSA by DOB and have DOB objections, although that's not required as part of the Build It Back process here. Many of all of the properties are substantial improvements, alteration type 1 and elevations. Most of the properties are utilizing Article 6, Chapter 4 special regulations applying in flood hazard areas and Appendix A. And I just listed some zoning sections in Appendix A that give special allowances for build-it-back properties, including Section 64A 312, which permits an increase in floor area of 20% for some of the homes. Section 64A 313, lot coverage, open space, and floor area regulations for small lots under 1,800 square feet are waived, and yard and height requirements only apply. Section 64A 33 permits development of lots that do not meet the minimum lot area and lot width requirements of Section 2332. And that's important because most of the properties in the Build It Back program do not meet the minimum lot area and lot width requirements of the zoning districts they're located in. And then the minimum distance between buildings is permitted to be waived for narrow lots, which is 23461C, as long as the open areas don't contain parking. But it would be impossible anyway for them to contain parking if they were less than 8 feet distance. So, and then the third page has the FDNY requirements that the design has to comply with. So there's a fact sheet for each property, and I'll just quickly summarize. So for the first application, 17 Abbey Court, which is in Garrettson Beach, Brooklyn, in Community District 15, an R4 zoning district. The waivers being requested here are the front yard, side yard, rear yard, and height. There was a change in the footprint of the home, and The DOB-approved original height was 24 feet. This property was over-elevated by a foot 2 inches during construction activities, which resulted in a 25-foot 2-inch height from design flood elevation, and therefore, they need waivers for all of their yards and the height as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
So is there a section in the zoning resolution that says if you lift to a certain height, it's considered no increase in the degree of noncompliance?
Not as far as I know, but there is an alternative height measurement section in 6400, Article 6, Chapter 4, but there's a special requirement for it, and I don't think that these meet it. But
Because I thought there is a specific provision in Article 6, Chapter 4, that allows for lifting, and it's not considered an increase in the degree of noncompliance?
it's lifting, but
No, I'm just,
I'm really,
you're at a loss.
I'm at a loss because the homes were they were elevated more than what DOB approved.
No, I understand,
Yes.
but when DOB approved the lifting to 23-foot 8 above grade, was that based on?
No, that was the original condition of the home that was there before it was rehabbed.
Oh, that's the
When I
height of
say
the roof.
original conditions, that was the original home that was there. And then the proposed existing conditions, that is the home that was rehabbed and elevated. So the original homes were not elevated, they're, as we all know.
Right.
So that's why height is measured from grade. But the proposed homes, the height has to be measured from the design flood elevation.
Right.
Also known as flood-resistant construction elevation. So that's why I had to put the grade height for the original
So
condition.
these are already built?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the point. Yeah.
They're built, but they don't have sign-off from DOB and were sent to BSA. Does the discussion about the existing and original conditions make sense for the height?
Yeah, so that's it. So it's section 64-724, thank you, that says non-complying buildings may be elevated or reconstructed to an increased height, which at all points does not exceed the difference between FRCE elevation and the applicable datum from which height is measured pursuant to the underlying regulations like curb height or grade. Such elevation or reconstruction may create a new noncompliance or increase the degree of an existing noncompliance.
So I believe that DOB is not applying that section based on the discussions that we had preliminarily when they first came to us, but I can verify.
I
Yeah.
want to confirm that that's been our experience, that never mind that it says it in the zoning resolution. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, but I will follow up with that.
Okay.
Okay, so for the second property, it's 18 Neutral Avenue, Staten Island, New Dorp Beach, Community District 2. It's an R3 Act zoning district. And the only waiver they're requesting here is height, because they actually comply with the yard regulations of the zoning district. And the height is 25 feet, 10 inches. Now, I just want to point out the fact that by using Appendix A, your height actually, the height regulations require a shorter building than is the underlying zoning does.
Oh.
Not sure if that was apparent, but the underlying zoning permits a 35 feet total height and 21 feet base height or 25 depending on the zoning district, as you all may remember. And then by using Appendix A, it's a new height regulation, which is the base height must be 19 feet, total height must be 25 feet. And the intent of that, I'm not sure, but it may have to do with the requirement for elevation of the homes. But, so this, even though this is actually going to be shorter even with the elevation, 2510. And this was over elevated by 8 inches from the DOB approved height. And then the third property is 26 Millbank Road. And this home is in the exact same footprint, but because it had an existing non-compliant front and rear yard, and it was over elevated by 1 foot, they needed to come here for the waiver for those 2 existing yards. And then the next property is 27 State Road, Queens. It's in Breezy Point. And this property needed a waiver for the side yard and minimum distance between neighboring buildings because Appendix A does not apply to Breezy Point properties.
Okay.
And then the last.
That's something we have the authority to waive, right?
Yes, 6492 permits waiving bulk requirements.
In general?
In general, except for FAR.
Yeah, okay.
And then the fifth property is 394 Beach 25th Street in Far Rockaway, and they're requesting a side yard and rear yard waiver, and there is a slight difference in the yards between the original conditions and the proposed conditions due to brick veneer being demoed. But this was also over elevated by 1 foot. And then the last property is 715 Cross Bay Boulevard, Queens in Broad Channel, Community District 14. This was recently rezoned from R32 to R3A Special Coastal Risk District. And this was over elevated in the exact same footprint and therefore needs waivers for the front, side, and rear yard.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Questions from anyone? No? Thank you, very helpful.
You're welcome.
Are we going to do this going forward?
I
with
hope
all
so.
The mayor's office?
And I'll follow up with that question.
Yeah, okay.
We're done?
Actually
No
wanted to do
questions?
it for other stuff.
This concludes the public review session for July 23rd, 2018.
Thank you.